Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's hearing, at which we are going to start hearing from control room staff, I think.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we are. And our first witness from the control room is Alex Norman. If she can please be called.
And repeat after me. I swear by Almighty God. I swear by Almighty God that the evidence I shall give, shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Do
you.
sit down, Mr. Warner, and make yourself comfortable there. Yes, Mr. Millett.
Good morning, Ms. Norman.
Good morning.
Can I start by asking you, please, to give your full name to the inquiry?
Alexandra Louise Norman.
Thank you. Thank you very much, I should say, first of all, for coming here today and assisting us with our investigations. We're very grateful to you for doing that. My questions, and I say this to all witnesses, my questions are intended to be short and simple. Sometimes they're not. So if you want me to repeat a question or put it in a different way, I'm very happy to do that. Similarly, if you need a break at any time, just signal and we can take a break.
Okay. Thank you.
Now, first of all, we have your witness statement dated the 15th of October 2017, and the reference to that is MET *0080589. Now, it's in a blue folder in front of you on the desk, or perhaps better, it's also displayed on a monitor on your desk on your right. We'll be looking at that.
Yeah.
We also, I think, have another statement with no date on it, which is MET *05199. Which is there. Do you remember when you created or produced that document?
Yeah, so initially I started producing that a few days after the fire. Took me about a week to actually write it up.
Did anybody ask you to write that?
I was told I had to make a statement. I can't remember who told me it, but I know that the LFB wanted statements as well from people.
When you did this one, the second one, did you use a document to refresh your recollection of the exact times that you've set out in the...
I used the incident report to get the times of things that I've actually, specific times in there.
Right, you say you used the incident report. Is that something created by the LFB?
It's on the Vision Mobilizing system, so I've got access to actually look at it.
I see, okay. We've got something called the short incident log, and we'll be looking at that, but is that what you mean?
Yeah, it's a longer log than that, but yes.
The long incident log,
yeah.
Right. Now, going back to your statement, your witness statement you gave to the police on the 15th of October 2017, my question is, have you read it recently?
Yes, I have.
And can you confirm that its contents are true?
There are some bits in there that I'm not, that aren't quite accurate. They don't complete what it actually should say. There's bits missing from it.
Right. Well, maybe we'll come back to those and correct them as we go, if we can. But subject to that, can you confirm that the contents of that statement are true?
Yes, I can.
Thank you. Similarly, with the statement that we've got on the screen that you did a few days later, have you read that one recently?
Yes, I have.
And again, can you confirm that its contents are true?
Yep.
Thank you. Have you discussed your statements or the evidence that you're going to give to the inquiry with anybody before coming here?
No.
No. Thank you. Can I start then by looking at your role in the LFB? At the time you did your statement for the police in October 2017, I think you'd been employed by the LFB for 14 or so years.
That's right, yeah.
And at the time of the fire, you held the rank of temporary operations manager, I think.
That's correct.
And what's your role now?
I am a substantive operations manager now, so I've been promoted fully into the role.
And when were you promoted?
It was, I went through a process in March, so it was from the 1st of April of this year.
1st of April this year. And before you were a temporary operations manager, as you were at June 2017, I think you were an assistant operations manager.
That's correct, yeah.
And before that, a control room officer.
Yes.
As at June 2014, how long had you been a temporary operations manager?
June 2017?
Yes, as at that date, how long had you been?
From the August 2016.
And turning then to the training you've had, on page 2 of your statement, if you could please go to that, in the third paragraph down, you start by saying, I will now talk about training. And you say that it's more on-the-job training, as you can see there. And you say, for the operational manager role, there is no formal training, but again learn through daily experiences with help from the assistant operations managers on duty. Now, did you receive any training to be an assistant operations manager before you became a temporary operations manager?
There are training courses that I've attended, sort of managing teams, leadership roles, things like that, but learning the role of assistant operations manager is experiential. You learn on the job with other people supporting you and teaching you.
Yes. Now, in the paragraph that we're looking at, in the second from last line, you say, we've had training for fire survival guidance calls, which was 3 monthly and based on scenarios. Our OST team know more around the training and development. Just as an initial question, what's the OST team? Is that operational support?
Operational support team, right. Yeah. So they work within the control.
Yes, and as at June 2017, do you remember who was on that or member of that OST?
Oh, there's a number of members on that team. There's about 5 or 6 of them. Do you want their names?
Well, if you've got 1 or 2 of them, who led it?
I think Joanne Smith was actually in charge of OST, and a number of assistant operations managers then work in that area.
Right, okay. Well, maybe we'll come back to that later on. Going to the more important question, where you say you had training 3 monthly and based on scenarios, was the training that you had 3 monthly the same every 3 months, or did it develop as your experience developed?
That's one of the parts of the statement that aren't actually accurate.
Right.
So what I actually said at the time, it was we did workshops with the command units. So we were facilitating their training more than anything, and it was scenario based, so we would get together as a group and talk through an incident, a scenario, and what we would want from them, what they would want from us, communication wise. And that was on a sort of rolling basis, but that was more for them than for us.
I see. And you say that was 3 monthly.
It was, yeah, quite regular.
Was it the same kind of scenario, the same kind of lessons?
Yes, it was. It was just
time?
with all different command units from all different watches, so it was to cover all of them.
I see. Did you go around London with this training?
No, they came to us.
They came
control.
to you, right.
Yeah.
Did they bring a command unit with them?
They would come on the command unit, yes.
Okay. So did you actually do the training on the command unit? Or
no, we did it
in
the training suite at Merton.
Right.
But they would then go down and do stuff themselves on the command unit.
Right.
I didn't ever get involved in any of that.
Okay. So the idea was that they knew how you worked and you knew how they worked?
Yeah.
In essence.
Just try and get an understanding, yeah.
Yes. Just a couple of questions following from that. How many command unit officers would you train or train with at a time?
There'd usually be 4. We'd usually have 2 command units up at the same time.
From the same station or different stations?
No, from different stations.
Okay.
It would depend how many they had riding, but it was sort of 4, sometimes maybe 5, but usually about 4.
Right. And was there a formal package of training that you would share and take lessons from, or was it done on a more ad hoc basis, more relaxed
I think there was a
basis?
formal package. I don't recall all of it, to be honest. But I remember we would have things like there's a fire in a tower block, X amount of people calling in, but it was only small amounts of people, and sharing the information that we would be giving to them, what we would be taking from the callers, and what we would want back from them when they were performing their duties.
Right. What was the maximum number of fire... Well, let me ask it this way. Did you do any training based on scenarios involving fire survival guidance calls?
We did, yeah.
What was the maximum number of fire survival guidance calls that the training packages, training events that you did involved?
How many of those was I involved in?
No, how many fire survival guidance calls at a time from a single incident did you...
2 or 3. It wasn't a lot.
Right.
It wasn't a lot. I can't remember completely, to be honest.
And can you remember what the last training programme or event like that was prior to the fire at Grenfell?
I can't remember the last time that I was involved in it, but I think they were still ongoing not too long before Grenfell.
Right.
But I wasn't involved in those at the time.
And do you know who designed the training that you did or shared with the command unit officers?
It was an assistant operations manager who worked in the control room at that time, in the OST.
Who was that?
Her name's Christine Sharp.
Christine Sharp. Do you know, is Christine Sharp still employed by the LFB, do you know?
No, she's not.
She's not. Do you know where she is now?
She passed away this year.
I'm sorry, right. Let me just go back to this question about documents. In the months, or perhaps a year up to Grenfell, was the training that you've described contained in a package of documents or some kind of computer program?
I don't know if there was a computer program at all. I think it was more paper-based.
Right.
I'll say I wasn't involved in it then, but I think it changed a bit, and I think there were more scenarios because there was some station managers involved as well, I believe. And they were sort of talking about their roles in it and things like that. But as I said, I wasn't involved, so I can't really sort of confirm, really.
Right. Now, the training, other than the training you've discussed where you trained with command unit officers, was there any other training that you did regularly in the months or years leading up to the Grenfell Tower fire?
Well, FSG training or training in general?
Training generally, let's start with that.
In the few years leading up to the fire, we were having a new mobilising system. So the majority of our training was focused on learning the new mobilising system.
Right. Is that under the mobilisation policy? The new, you say new system?
The new system, yeah. So we went to a completely different mobilising system. So we had to have a lot of training in that to learn how to use it. It was completely different to anything we had before. So it took a lot of time.
Right. When you say system, and let me just try and be clear.
I mean vision.
You mean
the vision system?
So
yeah.
Mechanical
Sorry.
system,
Yes, the vision
than...
mobilising
yes,
system.
Yes, I see.
Yeah.
And when was the new vision system introduced? Do you remember?
It actually went live in November 2015.
Right. And who delivered the training on the new vision system to the control room?
I actually assisted in delivering that. I went into the training team for a few months to help with that.
Right.
So it was mainly the operational support team, and I joined them to assist in the training.
So the OST delivered it?
Yes.
Did any external provider have a role in designing or delivering
yes, initially we were given training by a lady from Capita who provided the system to us. It was kind of a train the trainer, if you like, so we were taught how to use it so we could then train the members of staff.
Right, I see. Okay. Any other third-party provider training? No. Were you trained, leaving aside the vision system, were you trained on policy 790 and policy 539, which are, in general terms, fire survival guidance?
I was trained on 539 as part of my new entrance when I first joined, which was 2003,
Right.
and I have sort of been developing my own staff new entrance with that, with policy 539. 790, I don't think I've actually been trained on it. We've gone through it, but I wasn't say I was trained on it, but I am aware of it.
Right. And since or after 2003, did you have any refresher training on policy 539?
We had refresher training on, in regards to fire survival guidance of it, or in general?
Well, fire survival guidance in particular.
Yes, we had quite a big training sessions. I think it was 2011, 2012.
Was that the last training that you had on FSG?
Yes.
Before Grenfell?
Yes.
Who delivered that training?
That was the OST team. Again, Christine Sharp delivered that.
Right. Did you deliver any FSG training yourself?
No, I didn't.
No. Do you and the CROs receive the training, or is there a separate training on FSG for operations managers?
No, we have the same training.
Right.
We all have the same.
were you ever trained on how to handle multiple FSGs from a single incident?
No. Not that I recall.
Were you ever trained on how to assess whether or not a caller should evacuate or should stay put?
No.
Have you, as a manager, ever received any training on how to manage a control room in a large incident of, for example, 10 pumps or more?
No, that's just been experiential learning.
And would the same apply about training to manage a control room receiving multiple FSG calls?
Yes.
Where you say, and we covered this a moment ago in your statement, you say that you learn through daily experiences. Can we go back to that? It's the third paragraph on page 2 in the third line. You say you learn through daily experiences. Does anyone ever evaluate or assess your work that you do on a daily basis?
No.
No. There's no quality assurance or feedback of your work.
There's feedback. My line manager would give me feedback if she felt that I hadn't done something correct or I'd done something well. I would get feedback from there, but no evaluations. No. No
evaluations. And the feedback, is that formal or informal?
It's informal.
Okay. And when it's informal, is it recorded and escalated up through the organisation, or is it just one-on-one?
It's just one-on-one. It's not recorded anywhere.
Okay. Now, can we turn to look at your experience? At the bottom of page 2 of your statement, in the penultimate paragraph, second from the bottom, you say, being in the London Fire Brigade for over 10 years, I have had many different experiences and been involved in a lot of fires. And you go on to give some examples. And you say some requiring over 20 pumps,
yes,
appliances, and multiple resources. Before the Grenfell Tower fire, can you remember what was the highest number of FSG calls from a single incident that you've experienced in any rank?
There was a fire at a building called Adair Tower in, I think it was 2015, I believe. It's when I was in training, so it would have been around then. And we had, I think it was 8 or 9 FSG calls at that time.
And how many pumps were in attendance at Adair Tower? Do you remember? It would be a matter of record, but do you remember?
I think it was 12, possibly. Right. I think it was 12.
And can you give us an impression of how the control room dealt with 8 or 9 FSG calls? Yeah,
so we had a number of control officers taking the calls. It was during the day, so we had quite a lot of staff on duty. I was actually a part of the training team, but we recall staff with an alarm to alert people to come back due to high rates of calls. And when that went off, I came into the control room to assist. The people were giving the advice safer to stay where they were. I don't recall where the fire was, to be honest, in the building. And for the supervisors, we set up a really good process of where I was collating the information from the control officers and handing it to another AOM who was he was in constant contact with the command unit on scene, and then we were writing them up on a whiteboard. And every time, and they were in constant communication with us at that time, and we were told of each rescue when they were achieved, and we were crossing them off the board as they were done. So there was, a
couple of things arising out of that. It's very helpful. Was there a report, an incident report, after Adair Tower, which reported on the incident, which specifically focused on lessons learned about handling FSG calls?
Yes, so operations managers, if we get a call that's 8 pumps or above, we have to fill out a debrief form, right, which is used at the PRCs.
Yes.
So yes, there is one for that.
There is one for that. And can you remember in general terms, what the lessons learned from the Adair Tower fire, so far as FSG's calls are concerned, was?
I think the FSGs themselves, it was more about we learnt more about the communication, how to communicate with the incident ground, and a process that worked of recording for ourselves what was happening and keeping an open line all the time with the command unit, which really worked well.
Right, so the lesson you learnt was keeping, you say, an open line with the command unit.
Yeah, so it's constant information, and it was two-way.
I was going to come to that. So you had no difficulties with getting information back from the incident ground about the effect of the deployments?
Not that I recall. I wasn't
crews.
actually speaking to them, but the assistant operations manager who was speaking to them was getting information back.
Right.
Because I say we were crossing it off on the whiteboard when those flats were cleared.
Who was in charge of the control room?
On that day, it was operations manager Elizabeth Hims.
Right. Okay.
She put that process all into place. She sort of, let's do this and do that, and it worked really, really well.
Do you know how, on that occasion, and maybe you don't, who the incident commander was?
No, I don't, sorry.
Do you know how, who was running the command units at that incident?
No, I don't recall.
Do you know how effectively the command unit was able to communicate with the bridgehead at that event?
No.
It was a tower block, I assume, so there was
It was a tower block, yes. Yeah.
So there was a bridgehead there.
Yeah.
You don't know how the communications went between the command unit and the
we don't
bridgehead?
have any information about that. We very rarely would get anything back about the communications with the bridgehead, to be fair.
And do you remember whether and I'm sorry to ask you to dig into your memory, but do you remember in the case of Adair Tower what the standing advice was to residents, whether it was stay put or evacuate or?
It was to stay in their premises.
It was?
Yeah.
And do you remember whether that advice was changed at any stage during the incident?
No, it wasn't.
Do you remember what the basic thrust, flavour of the evidence, of the advice given to callers was by control room staff?
If there was smoke affecting their property, it was to block the doors, to go to a room furthest away from the smoke. At that point, because we had a number of staff on duty, people were able to stay on the line with the callers all the time. So they were assessing the situation constantly to see how it was all going.
So they were on the line to the callers when the BA crews arrived to rescue them?
Yeah, I believe so, yeah.
Right.
And that is sort of what normally does happen with a fire survivor guidance call. We're usually on the line until they're rescued.
Yes. And that was possible with 8 or 9 FSGs, was it? Clearly.
From what I recall, yeah. I mean, I could be wrong, but I'm sure that is what happened. I'm pretty sure.
Did Adair Tower, did the event produce any further training or intelligence within the LFB as to how to handle multiple FSG calls from a single tower block incident?
I don't know. Not that I'm aware of. I don't know.
You don't know? You personally aren't aware of any?
I personally don't know, no.
Right. But you're personally not aware of any?
I'm personally not aware of any, no.
Okay. And I think you described your main lesson, which was keeping the line open between the control room and the command unit. That was the key. Was that the key principle that you took away from?
Yeah, that for me that was, yes, yeah.
I'm going to assume, but please correct me if I'm wrong, that you, in your experience, have taken FSG calls yourself.
Yes, I have.
And advised the caller.
Yes.
And made the assessment about whether or not that person it was safe to leave or not.
Yeah.
Okay. I know you're aware, I'm going to assume again you're aware of a fire in Southwark in London in 2009 at Lakenall House.
Yes.
Were you involved in that incident?
No, I was not.
Were you involved in the review done by the LFB
No.
of the response?
No.
Were you aware, have you ever seen the Lakenall House report?
No, I haven't.
Okay, are you aware of the conclusions in general terms?
In general terms, in relation to FSG again? Or?
Yes, in relation to FSG.
The only thing that I can recall from that is the advice to leave when it gets to a point where you can't keep people safe.
Let me just see if I can ask you to look at that report It's HOM quadruple 01124. And I'm just going to ask you very briefly about one or two of its paragraphs. It's at tab 52 of the master documents bundle, and I want you to go, please, if you would, to page 50. I just want to show you just three or four paragraphs. First of all, paragraph 293. Expectation that callers would be rescued and stay put advice. And just quickly looking at that, it says COs had a clear expectation that fire crews would reach the callers quickly. Their experience was that fire appliances arrive quickly and that people are rescued by the brigade. This is borne out by the fact that only rarely, where FSG is given, do people die in fires. As rescues by crews were not immediate, there was a question whether the CO and or callers could have assessed the risk of attempting to escape from the flat, and whether the risk of moving closer to the fire but escaping was less than staying put and awaiting rescue. And then this important sentence: COs relied on advising callers to stay put, expecting that this would keep callers safe from fire. Now, do you remember ever becoming aware that that was, or those were, some of the conclusions from the Lacknell House fire?
I wasn't aware that that was the conclusion from the Lacknell House fire, but that is what we actually do expect, and that is how we believe most of our FSG calls. Where that's happened, we would have expected them to stay safe, yeah.
Right. The question arises, as it says, whether the control officer or callers could have assessed the risk of attempting to escape from the flat. Was that risk something that you ever received training on after Lacknell House, in other words, after 2012 in this case, which is the date of the report?
Not that I recall.
Looking at the next paragraph, I'm trying to take this a bit more quickly. Many callers mentioned that there was smoke outside their flat or smoke in the corridor preventing escape. This may have caused COs to move straight into the protect phase of FSG and not explore alternative escape routes with callers. There's a real risk in attempting a self-evacuation from a building on fire, that the occupant will move themselves into a position of greater harm rather than waiting in a safe location for rescue. That risk, again, did you ever have training on how to assess that risk after Lacknell House or after the date of this report?
I don't recall having training on it, but that is something that I am aware of.
Right. And then in the next paragraph, just pick it up halfway down. Moving to protect advice with the intent of keeping the caller safe may not always be the best solution, and the call should be continually reassessed. There may be a tendency to limit reassessment due to the protect ethos, although there is evidence that some proactive call handling did take place. Did you ever have training post-Lacknell House on how, or the speed at which to move to protect advice, and how you would continually reassess the situation the caller was in? Did you ever have training on that?
Not that I recall. It doesn't mean we didn't, I just don't recall having it.
Okay. And then finally, paragraph 296, effective communication between the control and incident command. And this may have been superseded, of course, by your own experiences at Adair Tower in 2015. But if you look at 3 lines down in that paragraph, control supervisors regularly try to obtain information about the progress with the incident, particularly in relation to callers being given FSG. In line with the practice at the time, there was much less information being passed from the incident ground to control about the progress of firefighting and rescue efforts. It is not clear if COs had been given information about progress, that it would have influenced the advice given to callers. My question is, after Lacknell, did you or other control room staff get training on how to get the best information and the most continual flow of information from the incident ground?
No, not from the incident ground.
We can take that down. In a very general sense, as an experienced operations manager, as you were at the time of the fire, what do you think changed, if anything, in the control room as a result of the lessons learnt at Lacanau?
Ooh. What do I think changed?
Yes.
I think that would be very hard to say because of the night of Grenfell was unlike no other. I think there was... it's quite a tough question.
Let me try and put it a different way, because I may have confused you with the reference to Grenfell, but leading up to Grenfell Tower, if you ignore the event of Grenfell Tower for the moment in your mind, and if I was to ask you this question on the 13th of June 2017, my question is, as an experienced operations manager running a control room, do you think anything changed in terms of control room practice as a result of Lacanau House?
There is more reassessing in calls now. I think that's something that's come across. But it's something we've always reassessed, but I think it's more so because of that.
Right.
And always sort of trying to find alternative escape routes. It's something that came out of that.
Right. And we'll come to this, but you just mentioned always trying to find alternative escape routes, and that's something that very much appeared in the report we've just seen.
Yes.
How reliant would you be generally as a control room officer on what you were told by the caller about the ability to escape and the conditions in the escape route? Or how much would you attempt to explore the realities with the caller?
You have to rely on the caller because we can't see, obviously. We don't know where they are, what they can see. So our information is all based on what the caller is telling us. But if there is no means of escape and the situation is getting dire, you would always say, is there a back door if it's in a house? Is there a ground floor window you can get out of? Things like that, just looking at means that they may not have considered at the time. Because if someone's panicking, they won't think about that sometimes.
And how would you know what information to get out of the caller which would help you give the right advice about escape routes?
It would be where the fire is, where they are in relation to the fire, what sort of property they're in. Because obviously if they're in high-up flats, you're not going to ask them to come out of a window. The layout of their building.
Right.
Questions like that, really. But also, obviously, how severe the fire is and where it's all getting worse.
And what about making an assessment jointly while you're on the phone about the conditions in the escape route itself?
That would be part of the conversation. You'd be asking what the conditions are like. You know, the first thing you'll say is, why can't you leave? Okay, there's a fire wherever they are. So is that blocking your exit? Yes, it's blocking my exit. What's blocking your exit? Is it the fire? Is it the smoke? If they're saying the smoke's really thick and it's blocking their exit, we'll move them to a place of safety or to another room, and then start going through, okay, you know, the fire brigade are on the way to you, they're coming for you. It would also depend on how long that call's going on for and what the conditions are like when they're in there.
To what extent would you, when giving that advice on the assessment of the escape route, to what extent would you also take into account or look for information coming back from the incident ground about the conditions in the escape route?
I don't actually think we necessarily would. We don't usually get information back on a fire survival and guidance call when they're actually on progress to it. We're giving them information. The first we know about anything like that, we would obviously tell them the conditions and where the caller is. But the first thing we know about that is we actually, usually if we're on the phone, hear them going into the property, breaking in, calling out, alerting the caller that they're there. And the caller normally would say, they're here, they're here.
If you weren't satisfied that you got enough clear information from the caller about the conditions in the escape route, would you, as a matter of practice, seek that information from the incident ground?
I never have done before, no.
Right. Would you be able to rely on what other callers in the control room, other controllers in the control room?
I think if you had multiple calls, you would take into account what other people are saying. Yeah.
Right, but that would be by overhearing them, would it, or by
or by what people are telling you?
Right.
What CROs that are taking the calls, the information they're giving to you?
Right.
About the calls they're handling.
In your experience, and I don't know whether this happened at Adair Tower, was there a system, or could there be a system, whereby that information about developing conditions in the escape route or routes could be collated in one place and then disseminated to all controllers at the same time?
Well, how do you mean by us in the control room?
Yes.
That would be difficult if they were still on calls and stuff all the time, because you'd want them to be concentrating on their own calls. So I don't believe that is something that we would do. They may become aware, because you do hear what's going on around you. Even when you're on a call, you are aware of what's going on in the control room.
Yes. Now, can I turn to a slightly different topic, which is the stay put advice itself? And I want to begin by asking you about policy number 539, which is in our policy bundle at tab 3. And can I ask you please to be shown page 16 of that, which is appendix 3. If you'd please look at the third paragraph, it says, brigade control advise callers to get out and stay out. However, if a call is received from a high-rise building where fire, heat and smoke are not affecting the caller, LFB would advise that. And then here is what looks like the advice. You are usually safest to remain in your premises unless affected by fire, heat or smoke. If the situation changes, you should leave your premises and dial 999 if you need further assistance. And then it goes on, should the caller be unable to escape, an information file containing prompts are in place on the computer-aided mobilizing system to assist the control room officer in providing guidance to assist the caller to safety, providing timely and relevant information to the attending resources, provide reassurance to the caller that help and assistance is forthcoming. And I've read that all to you, but because I wanted you to see the full context. But where it says you're usually safest to remain in your premises unless affected by fire, heat or smoke, etc., do you agree that when you refer to stay put, or the stay put advice, is that the advice to give?
Yes.
And is your understanding that that is the basic standing advice in respect of most tower blocks, residential tower blocks?
Yes, it is, yeah.
If any block had a different standing advice which applied to it, how would the control room know that?
What do you mean, if there was an evacuation
Yes.
plan or something? Before the night of Grenfell, I don't believe we would have known that.
Now?
Yes, we do now.
You do you?
Yes.
How do you access that information now?
So when we input an address into the mobilising system, to Vision, if a premises has any comments on it or what we call a risk, it comes up on the screen in front of you. So there are a number of blocks that says evacuation plans in place that are already there for the building. What those evacuation plans are, we don't know.
And that wasn't, are you saying that wasn't the case prior to Grenfell?
No.
Right. Now, in your experience, what is generally understood by the word affected, where you say affected by fire, heat or smoke? Now, just to be clear, I'm not asking you for your personal understanding of the word, but what the general understanding in the control room would be.
If it's coming into your property.
Right.
So if the fire is coming into your property, or if the heat's becoming very intense, or if there's smoke coming in through the doors or windows.
Right. And what if the smoke hasn't yet come into your property but is approaching? You can see it coming towards you. Would you still think that that person was affected?
Not at that time, no. Not if it actually wasn't affected their property itself.
And how would you expect a control room officer to determine if the caller's premises are affected by fire, heat or smoke?
Through the questioning of the caller. The first thing we say is, are you able to leave? And they will usually say no if they're not, and give the reasons why. So they say, no, there's too much smoke coming in, there's smoke outside my door, the fire's here, there.
Right.
So we have questions that we would ask them, you know, what's stopping you getting... The first thing is, why can't you leave?
Is that the first thing? Or would the first thing be, are you affected?
No, the first thing is, why. The words would be, why can't you leave?
I see. Okay. And to make a determination of whether the caller's premises are affected by fire, what information normally would you ask for?
is the fire in your property? Yes or no. If it's not, have you got smoke coming in?
Right.
And you would just, the questions you would, each question, the answer would then lead on to further questioning.
Prior to June 2014, what would a control room officer do if they couldn't form a clear picture in their own head about how badly the fire was affected by fire, heat or smoke?
In a high-rise?
In a high-rise.
We would ask them to say they were safer to remain where they were, unless the actual fire was in their flat affecting them.
Is that even if the CRO couldn't actually form a very clear view about whether that person was affected or not affected?
I believe so, yeah.
So you default to stay put if you weren't sure?
Yeah. That's what I believe, yes.
Okay. And would it be normal, in your experience, for any control room officer to tell the caller, well, it's up to you, I can't really advise you whether to leave or not?
Fire survival guidance is a guidance, so it's not an instruction. We're advising you that this is the safest option, that we believe this is the safest option at this time. If people choose to leave, it's not really normal to say I wouldn't advise you. I don't advise you.
Right.
But it is guidance. It's not an instruction.
Right.
So people do choose to ignore it and leave.
But
understandably.
Do I take it from that actually in your experience, the role of the control room officer is to assist them as best they can to make up their minds?
We will give them the guidance that we can and do the best we can to keep them safe. Most of the time they do follow that guidance. But yes, yeah.
Okay. Turning to FSG, are you familiar with, at least in general terms, Policy 539?
Yeah.
And what about Policy 790?
Yeah.
Can you help me then with the 4 principles? Let's just look at the 4 principles, which I think are escape, assess, protect and rescue.
Yeah.
Have I got that right?
It's escape, protect, assess and rescue.
Well, let's look
But yeah, that's the 4 principles.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it could be reassess. It depends what document you look at. But if you look lower down the same page, escape, assess, protect, reassess.
Oh yeah.
So just help me with that. First of all, escape. How would a control room officer help the caller to assess the means of escape if the control room doesn't have plans of the building?
So that would be by questioning of the caller. Do you know of any other exits? Are there any fire escapes?
Would the CRO go straight to the protect phase, which is 2 down, without considering the assess phase?
I think the assess and the protect sort of come in together. So the question would be, okay, where is the fire? As it says, where are you? Okay, can you move away from the fire? So the questions would kind of lead into each other.
Right.
To move them away from it.
So the escape phase is the escape phase, and then the assess and protect are really one and the same thing. Is that what you're saying?
They lead on to each other, yeah. Yeah, they're intertwined.
Because it's question, answer, advice.
Yeah.
I don't want to put words in your
No,
mouth,
yeah.
but am I
Yes.
summarising your
that's how,
evidence?
yeah.
Okay. Would you ever move on to assess and protect, though, without absolutely having satisfied yourself as a CRO that you've looked at all possible safe alternative escape routes?
Yeah, I think you probably would. Initially, you would, okay, can you get out? No. Why can't you get out? And I think the alternative escape routes, this all kind of flows into itself. It's all intertwined.
Let me answer the question slightly differently. In your experience as a control room officer, would you move to assess and protect without having satisfied yourself that you looked at all options for a safe alternative escape first?
I think that would depend on the caller and the condition of the actual room or area they actually were in at that time. Because I think I might look in to get them into a safer room initially if there was a lot of smoke or fire to protect them, and then once we've got them safe for that time being, to then move into further questioning about alternative escape routes.
I see. Okay. So the actual sort of pre-priority would be making sure they were physically safe so that you could continue to get
Question
information
them.
from
Yes.
them and then advise them. I see.
Yeah.
But leaving that on one side, just to press the point one more time, or question one more time, would a CRO, having made sure that the caller was safe for the moment, would the CRO move to assess and protect without first absolutely having satisfied themselves from the information they had that a safe alternative escape wasn't available?
I think that would be on each individual call, that would be judged, to be perfectly honest.
Right. Okay. And then turning to reassessment, it follows reassure the caller and reassess the caller's situation. And we can see some example questions about reassessment. You ask those questions. How often do you keep asking them in order to reassess?
Constantly until they're rescued.
Right. And then finally, rescue. I said there were four principles. In fact, there look like five, actually, leading to rescue. You say, I think, or it says, that control room officers will remain on the telephone with the caller and assist with rescue. And I think what you said earlier is that requires a constant open line of communications with the incident ground.
So that would be us giving the incident ground all the information we had, the layout of the building if we'd been able to obtain it,
Right.
where exactly the caller is, how many people there are with them, what window they're at, where the window's facing, if that assists in any way, any information we can give to assist and to save time.
And that constant line of communication, my question is it feasible when you have multiple FSGs to the same incident? But you gave us some evidence earlier about Adair Tower.
Yeah.
Where, is it right? I mean, constant lines of communication were feasible in that incident.
Were. Yeah.
How were those lines of communication kept open?
At Adair Tower?
Yes.
It was an assistant operations manager on the phone to a command unit the whole time, the Fire Survival Guidance Command Unit.
Right, and what was the phone, do you know?
It was on our X, onto, I don't know what phone they were on, I believe it's a mobile phone on the command unit, but it's on our communication system.
Okay, and were those recorded?
Yes, they were.
Yes, okay. So you didn't use brigade mobiles at that incident?
Not at our end. Not in
At
the
your
control.
end? No, I understand. And do you know whether the CSS on the command unit was used at Adair Tower?
No, I don't know.
Okay, you don't know. You don't know. Do you remember which command units were deployed at Adair Tower?
I have absolutely no recollection of that at all. No,
Right.
sorry.
Okay. A general question with FSG calls: what is your experience as to how information is used, FSG information is used once it gets to the incident ground?
How do you mean?
Well, when it goes into the command unit,
Yes.
what normally happens to it after that?
Oh, they'll pass it on to whoever's performing the rescues. I don't know, that would be obviously different. It would be a bridgehead if it was a high-rise. If it's a normal premises, to be honest, the command unit would probably be there after the pumps have got to them.
Yes.
To be honest, the first machines would usually get in pretty quickly in a normal dwelling fire.
Can I just ask you to look at policy 790, which is at tab 5 of our policies bundle, Paul, and to go to paragraph 9, which is on page 5. And paragraph 9.1 says, it is vital that control is kept informed of the actions being taken to resolve each FSG call. The fact that control is aware of the actions being carried out on the incident ground will greatly enhance the advice given to FSG callers. Informative messages from the incident ground should also contain an update on progress relating to those specific FSG calls by both the flat/house number to avoid confusion. And then 9.3, the outcome of every FSG call must be communicated to control. Now, I've read those 3 paragraphs to you in full, but taking each one in turn, are you aware, in your experience prior to Grenfell Tower, of any event where control wasn't kept informed of the actions being taken to resolve each FSG call?
As I said, most FSG calls we actually are on the line to the caller and we actually do hear the crews performing the rescue. So we know, but they do come back to us pretty quickly and tell us that they've rescued. As an informative message, they'll give, the dwellings. And then 2 people rescued, 1 person rescued, whatever.
Right. So when you look at the next sentence, the fact that control is aware, and indeed it goes on to discuss informative messages in the next paragraph, is your experience that the messages that came back from the incident ground from officers there rather than from the caller came via informative messages?
Yes, once the rescues had been done, yes, they would.
Okay. Would you ever get any information, in your experience, back from the incident ground about the status of a rescue while it was ongoing?
No, I haven't done before, no.
Right. 9.2 says informative messages from the incident ground should also contain an update on progress relating to those specific FSG calls. Did informative messages ever, in your experience, contain an update on progress, or were they only ever sent after the rescue was completed?
After the rescue is completed.
9.3 says the outcome of every FSG call must be communicated to the control. And again, I'm summarising your evidence, but am I right in thinking that those came by informative messages?
Yes. Yeah.
I see. So I think we could take from that in your experience, 9.2 was never complied with as a matter of policy.
No.
Now, in your statement, you can put that away, at paragraph 1 on page 3, can I just ask you to look at that? You say in the 4th line, well, you can start with the 3rd line, the CRO will raise their hand to notify a supervisor, which would be the operations manager or assistant operations manager. The supervisor would go and listen to the call via the headset, whilst the CRO gives the advice.
Yeah, that's also, you can also listen to it from our own positions. We can monitor their calls from there as well.
I was going to ask you, if you needed physically...
Sorry, I preempted you there.
No, you did, and that was very good. So they can, I see, so you can sit where you're sitting, and how do you do that mechanically?
We've got, on our X, we've got buttons where it's monitor calls, and you can select the position they're sitting at, and you will just be listening into their call. You can't speak or anything, it's just listening. It's just for listening purposes. We do it quite a lot.
And where the CRO wants assistance with the advice given, would you be able to do that from where you were sitting?
No, you would go over to them to do that.
Right.
Yeah. Or,
Okay.
sorry.
I'm sorry, no, finish your answer.
Or one of their colleagues who are sitting next to them could assist them with it as well.
I was going to ask you, you've used the expression the X more than
Yes.
once. Can you just spell it out?
Sorry,
for us,
so
those of us who don't know?
sorry, I do apologise. The X is our communication system. It's an integrated communication system. So that's where all of our calls come in on, and where the radio works from. It's kind of like a sort of switchboard, if you like, really. It's where everything comes in on. It's a touch screen. So that's where everything comes in.
Good.
And that's where everything's recorded from.
Right, that's helpful. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sorry,
So that contains vision, does it, as well? Or is that a separate system?
It's part of the vision system, but it's a separate screen. So we have 2 screens for our mobilising system, and then this one touch screen, which is on your left-hand side of you.
And what's on the other screen?
The other 2 screens.
Yes, you have 2 screens. You've got X on
So you have
on
X on one screen, and on the screen that's directly in front of you, you have your incident, which is called a call collection form, will come up in front of you, and it gives you the boxes where you fill the information in. So it will come up with the caller's telephone number. If it's a landline, it will come up with a premises detail, but we still always question about the detail because it might not be correct. And you put in instant details, and that's where the risks pop up as well. So if any risks, as soon as you put an address in, the risk will come up in front of you to show if there's any situations in that location you need to be aware of. As I say, like mass evacuation.
And that's the control room officer?
That's everybody in the control room.
I was going to ask you, that's everyone?
They're all the same. They're all the same, yeah.
Right. And if you wanted to access vision to see what was being inputted onto it as you went along, would you be able to do that through one or other of these screens?
No, I can't see the screens.
You can't see vision?
No, it's only the X I can actually see at the moment.
So if anybody in the control room wanted to know what message had been passed by the radio operator to the command unit...
Oh, you can see that. That's in the logs.
Okay, sorry.
Sorry, I thought you meant about the actual address they were putting in. No,
my mistake.
everyone you can see it in the logs that's been put in.
That's what I meant. But was I
Okay.
wrong when I referred to it as vision?
No, I thought when you went vision, I thought you meant you were asking about when we were actually inputting details.
Fine. Okay. So would you flip from which screen would you use if you wanted to move to look at the logs?
You'd use your middle screen.
Right. Okay.
Sorry to interrupt you again. You now refer to a middle screen. Just
So
how many have you got in total?
3.
I thought so.
Right.
Do you want to follow
So
that?
thought it was
one
2.
is the X, and the other 2 are the mobilising system.
Right. Okay. So you've got the X on your left,
Yes.
and in front of you you've got what?
So in front of you, you've got your main screen. So if you're not dealing with a call, an incident, you have the incident list in front of you, which shows all the current incidents that we're going through at the moment. We have what we call, I'm trying to visualise it now, the top right, you have what we call a bingo card. So that shows all our appliances, our officers that are available, or whatever their statuses are.
Okay.
And there's a box next to that as well, which is where the service requests go into, which is in that top right-hand corner.
And if you wanted to access the vision or the log on using the vision system, which screen would you use? The middle
You'd be
one or
using the middle
just the middle
screen.
one? You referred to other incidents going through. I think this is a question no one has asked yet, so I'll try it. We obviously, this is about Grenfell, but were there other incidents in the control room that night, which from 1 a.m. onwards, with which staff had to deal?
There were a couple. To be honest, we were very, very lucky that there wasn't anything else going on that night. It was, other than obviously Grenfell, it was quiet in the rest of London.
Right. Now that takes us neatly into the night of the fire, and I was going to start with the facilities in the control room, but we've been going for an hour, and Mr. Chairman, I think that might be an appropriate time for a break.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Would you like a break now?
That would be really nice, yes, please.
All right. Can we afford 10 minutes?
Yes, we can.
Yep.
Right. We'll have a 10-minute break.
Okay,
then.
thank you.
Please don't talk to anyone about your evidence or anything related to it while you're out of the room.
Okay.
Sorry, could you just... I'm sorry, could you just be quiet while I'm addressing the witness? And you gave the usher now. We'll resume at 22:11.
Okay,
All right?
thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, 22:11 then, please. Thank you. All right, could you ask Miss Norman to come back in, please? Right, ready to carry on?
Yes, yes.
Good, thank you. Yes, Mr. Millett?
Thank you for coming back. Can I turn then to the facilities in the control room? And we know the control room was working from the Stratford fallback centre because of routine maintenance at Merton on the night of the fire.
Yes, that's correct.
And if we go to the control report produced by the LFB, which we have at tab 107 of our documents bundle, and this is LFB 4790. Can I ask you please to go to page 75 in that? I'm sorry, 175. In that, we should be able to see a picture of the Stratford control room. Now, just help us with this control room. Can you just tell us where you, looking at it, where you were sitting on the night of the fire?
I was sitting where the TV is, in that middle position, just in front of the television. Do you want me to point to it?
Yeah, that would be helpful if you wouldn't mind.
Is that okay? So I was sitting in this middle position here.
Right. Okay. If the cursor can go to it so that people on live stream can see it, you were sitting there. And who did you have on your left? At that station on your left?
I had AOM Debbie Reel on my left.
So Debbie Reel was on your left, and was there any? Is there a seat or station on your right?
Yes, there was. Yeah, Peter May was sitting there.
Peter May. Okay. And which is the head table? We've heard some evidence about a head table. Which was that?
Well, it's the office of the watch position, but we don't call it a head table. But that's that position there.
That is the position.
That area there. Yeah.
Right. When Jason Oliffe arrived,
Yes.
Where was he sitting or standing?
When he was doing the whiteboards and everything,
Yes.
do you mean? Shall I point it out again?
Please.
It was over here. In this position.
In that gap, by what looks like a radiator or window.
That's a blind, but yes, he was sitting there.
Okay. Was that... Okay, and the whiteboards were what? Were they against the blank wall there? We can
They
see.
were, yes. So they're always there. We use them for secondary mobilising if we have to use them.
Right. And where, just help me, where was Sharon Darby as the radio operator sitting?
I'll get up again, it's easier.
Yeah, sorry. Probably have to,
Okay.
have to stand there for a bit.
Sharon was sitting here, in this position here,
I see.
the end one there.
Right. And did she have special radio equipment there at that station which nobody else had? Or?
The equipment's the same everywhere.
Same everywhere.
Yeah.
And at the two stations immediately in front of us, who was sitting there on the night? Do you remember?
Angie Gotts was on the one to the right, initially of Sharon, and to the right of Angie was Sarah Russell.
Sarah Russell, Angie and Sarah. Right, I see. And can you just help us, who else was sitting where on the night, to the best of your recollection?
Okay, so there's a couple of tables you can't actually see.
Well, there's one on the right, which seems to be half out of shot I was going to ask you about.
Yeah, so Pete Duddy was sitting here, and here.
He was there, right.
Christine Houston was sitting in one of these, but I can't remember which one, but one of these positions.
I thought you said
I think
that...
it's this one.
So then I'm confused. I thought you said Angie Gotts was on the right and
No,
Sarah
Angie
Russell.
Gotts, so no, I'm talking about this bank of positions here. So
I see.
Sharon was here, Angie was here, and Sarah was here.
Right. And where was Heidi Fox? Do you remember?
Heidi was over,
Okay.
sort of behind us over in the corner there.
And what about there seem to be 1, 2, perhaps 3 stations at the back of the room, near the blind, that we can see. Is it 3 stations there?
It's just a bit too close to me. There's 2 there.
We
I
haven't
think.
helped by.
Are you
There's 2.
talking about here?
Yes. No, yes. We can see.
There was no one sitting there.
They were vacant, were they?
Yes. when we came on duty, the shift that were on duty before was sitting there, and they're sort of a shift switch. I can't say it, a switch shift. So they're like a cover shift. So they were there till 10 o'clock, which is why we didn't use those positions.
If either of the operators in the absolute foreground wanted to communicate with Pete Duddy, who was sitting at the other, sitting, as it were, two desks beyond, how would they communicate?
It would depend on the volume of noise in the control room. So
Right.
if there wasn't too much noise, they would just speak to him directly, because it's actually quite small in there. Or they would go up and speak to him if they weren't taking a call at the time.
Now, we're helping the chairman understand the screens and the different screens that we have. We can see, if we just take the chair to the left, which I think you said was occupied by Sarah, correct me, Sarah Russell on the nut.
So Sarah was sitting over here.
Yes.
So they're facing away from us, those screens.
So then it was Christine Howson, I think,
Yes.
on the night, sitting there, the left-hand chair, right in the foreground. There are 3 screens on the desk.
Yes.
Just run us through what each screen shows or
Okay.
does.
So the screen that's on the left, that would be the IX. The screen in the middle is the main that's our main screen for mobilising. So that's where our call collection forms come on. That's where all our officers are, our service requests. So that's our main screen, if you like. And the screen on the right, that's where our map is. It's where our, if we were using our emails and things, they would come up on that screen. It's where the reference information files will come up on there.
And each operator has a headset
Yes.
and a microphone
Yes.
attached to the headset, is that right?
Yes, that's right.
What's that plugged into?
So there are...
Or is it
I don't know if you can see
Bluetoothed?
them. There are, so in the desk, you can't really see them on here, but here, there are little sockets that you just push it into. You can't see them, they don't show in that picture.
Okay. And the headset and microphone, are they operable from the screens or the keyboard, or
No,
are they
you just
operated?
speak into them, everything just comes into your headset. You don't need your hands to use your headset, you just talk.
Okay. Now, if you wanted to pass a message to the radio operator sitting where Sharon Darby was, and you've explained she was in the middle on the left, in a normal incident, how would a control room officer go about passing a message to the radio operator to send to the command unit?
Via service request.
So it would be typed in to the system. Which system would it be typed into by a CRO?
Into the vision system.
Into the vision system, and
Yeah.
then that would be sent. And it would, is this right? It would pop up on.
So
her
with a
screen?
service request, you have an instant open, and there's a thing that says service request. Have you got any pictures of the screens at all?
No.
No. Oh. So there's a tab that says service request. So you click on that, and it opens up a box, and it's a message box. So you type in there initially RT4, and then you'd put the call sign that it needs to go to, and type the message up you want to send, and then you would press apply, and that then goes into a list.
I see.
And then you would shout to the radio operator, message on 4 or 2.
It was that last point I was interested in. It would go into the list, it would appear on the log,
Yeah.
but you'd have to tell the radio operator that there was a service request. Is that?
You would normally tell them, yeah. It's just practice that we do.
Would the radio operator not be sitting there watching the vision system ready for the next service request?
Well, she could be taking another message from somebody else, or so no, not necessarily just watching the screen. No.
Now, we'll come back to this page in a moment, so we don't have to take it away. But just going back to your statement, you say on your statement on page 2 in the second paragraph that the Stratford control room was smaller, and you say you can hear what's going on and it's better for working as a team. I've read that out to you. We haven't gone back to the statement. But,
No, but that's correct, yeah.
Did those advantages assist you and your team on the night of the Grenfell fire?
Yes, I believe they did, because we could hear more of the conversations from our end about what the calls were involving.
And maybe as just a basic comparison, we can look at the layout of the Merton control room, which is on page 174. It's the page before, Paul, of the of the control report. Is that Merton?
Yes, it is.
And so you can see the desks much further apart.
Yes, they are.
And is it just a simple case of being closer together and therefore in Stratford and therefore being able to hear people more
Yeah,
easily?
Merton's also got really, really high ceilings.
Right, as you can
And
see.
the wall at the back has got something on it, some sort of soundproofing, so you do lose the noise a bit in there. So if somebody on the back position was doing something, I wouldn't be able to hear it at the supervisor's position.
Right. Now, there are negatives, which I think you say are that it has less equipment than Merton,
Yes,
with no, no helicopter television or interactive maps.
that's right.
The helicopter television, is that the heli-telly?
Yes, it is, yeah.
Which is the downlink,
Yes.
is it from, right. And is there none at all at Stratford?
No.
It's not that it wasn't working, it just doesn't exist, is that right?
I don't know if it doesn't exist. I don't think there's a link to it, but
Right.
I don't really know why there isn't one there. But no, I've never known it to work there personally.
So is it that it was there but didn't work, or that wasn't there at all?
I believe it wasn't there.
Right. And how would the heli-telly normally help at an incident?
To be honest, we don't really use them for incidents. They're more useful when we've got large events, say. I mean, I've found it beneficial when Notting Hill Carnival's been going on, for things like that, because you can get an overview if there's any crowd problems or anything like that, obviously affecting our crews and stations.
Right.
It's not something we use on a regular basis.
Right. Have you ever used information from the heli-telly at a high-rise fire?
No.
Yeah, you mentioned interactive maps.
Yes.
That are present at Merton but not at Stratford. Would interactive maps have helped you on the night of the Grenfell Tower fire?
They would have helped us with our providing fire cover for the rest of London once we lost all of those appliances, and also to look at what appliances we could move in to cover the area, and potential reliefs for the incident as well, which we were pre-planning.
Now, if we go to the middle paragraph on this very page 175 of the control report, we can see that there's also a reference to the fact that the Stratford site does not have access to the brigade's dynamic cover tool, DCT.
Yes, that's the interactive map that I was talking about.
That's the interactive
Yes,
map, is it? I
yeah.
see. Turning then to the just one more question on policy, if I can, before we move to the events of the actual night itself, and going back to the question of training. In your experience, was training ever designed or delivered which included dealing with people who don't have English as a first language?
No.
And what about people who come from immigrant or ethnic minority cultures and have perhaps a different cultural approach to how to deal with an authority?
No, there's no specific training for that, no.
When training is designed and delivered, can you help me? Was there any effort to factor in how to speak to people, how to address people from different cultures and backgrounds?
Yeah, we do call handling techniques and how to sort of coax information out of callers and different ways of trying to train people, to speak to people. So with someone who has a language barrier, they've usually got a piece of information with them, that maybe an address they can give us a postcode from, or a letter they can look at that they can read out to us, and things like that. So we do have different call handling techniques, but it's also experiential.
But just focusing on, I understand the experience point, but just focusing on training, was there any formal training on how to go about addressing people from different ethnic or cultural backgrounds?
No, that would just be part of call handling techniques, really, to be honest, about coaxing information from people, regardless of their backgrounds.
Regardless of their background, right? So there's no, so in the training
there's no
techniques,
specific.
No, okay. And when you try to obtain information on calls, it looks as if none of the policies expressly require control room officers to examine whether people in the flat or the caller has, either the caller or somebody with the caller has any particular mobility issues or is elderly. Is that right?
No, that's right, yeah. With mobility issues, that is something the caller would usually provide us with pretty quickly if they are if they believed they're trapped in their flats
Right,
or houses.
But would the CRO actually go out and look for that information? Would they say, do you have any mobility issues?
No.
Is there a reason for that?
It would, because I don't know, but it would usually come from the questioning of the caller when you say, why can't you get out? That if it's not because of the heat and smoke or the fire, and it's you know, it's at a level that's okay, they will say because I'm in a wheelchair or because I'm bedbound or mobility issues. They would always come forward with that information themselves.
In your experience, they would they?
Yes, yeah.
Would you, in your experience, have you come across people who are who wouldn't volunteer that information because they were either there was some cultural question about it or they were embarrassed in some way?
I haven't personally, no.
No. Is that a subject which is the subject of any training?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Turning to the incident itself, you were the operations manager on duty at Stratford on the night, weren't
Yes.
you? And I think you had two AOMs with you,
Yes.
Peter May and Debbie Real.
Yes.
Is it? I call her Real. Is that?
No, it's real.
It's real.
Yeah.
Okay. And the rest of the watch, I think, were CROs.
That's right, yeah.
Were you the most senior person in the control room at the start of the shift?
Yes, I was.
And who was, if anyone, who was your line manager?
So Joanne Smith is my line manager.
But she wasn't there?
No, she wasn't at that time, no.
Okay. And at what point did a more senior person to you arrive?
When Joanne arrived, about 2:15.
You say about 2:15. We'll come to that. What about Jason Olive?
Jason Olive is a similar rank to myself, so he's not senior to me.
Right. Now, can I ask you to go back to what I'm calling the control report? Which is LFB 4790. And go to page 176, please. On that page is set out very helpfully the staffing structure, roles and responsibilities. You can see it all there. I just want to look at something with you. Just below halfway down the page it says, on any given shift, the minimum number of staff on duty is 11. This is made up of a minimum of 2 supervisors and 9 CROs. The OM and AOM are colloquially referred to as supervisors. Now, according to our records, and this may be wrong, but we have a record of 11 in the Stratford control room on the night, but only 8 CROs, but with 3 supervisors. Would that be right?
Yes, that would be right.
So is it right that you were 1 CRO short on the night?
No, we were up to our model staffing level. So the 11 on duty is made up, including the supervisors and the control officers.
Yes.
So you would have 3 supervisors and then 8 control officers
Yes.
to bring you to your 11.
Yes. It says minimum of 2 supervisors and 9 CROs. That would tend to indicate that if you only had 8 CROs, you were missing a CRO.
Yeah, we had 3 supervisors.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
is it there you had 11, the balance was more supervisors than CROs? I mean, you had 1 more supervisor than you needed and 1 less CRO than you needed.
No, we have 3 supervisors on duty. That's what we target for, not 2.
Well, I think the thrust of the question may be, would one of the supervisors act as a CRO if circumstances required?
No, they would not.
They
No. They can do the role of a CRO, as in taking calls and
They
things
can,
like that.
yeah.
Yes, yeah, everyone
Right.
can do the same role if need be.
Yeah. Yes.
But they were there as a supervisory level.
Right. So just pressing my question one more time.
Okay.
In terms of what we see in the control report, where we're told minimum number of staff is 11, 2 supervisors and 9 CROs. As a matter of fact, I think you've agreed that you actually had 3 supervisors.
Yes.
But only 8 CROs.
Yes.
So it would follow that you were a CRO short, according to this statement.
No, because that should be 8 CROs, 3 supervisors and 8 CROs.
Yes. And instead of 9, you had 8.
Yes,
So you were
yes.
1 short.
Yes. No,
Now-
we
Well, I
weren't,
think-
no,
I
we
think
weren't
we-
sure.
I think there's a danger of getting at cross purposes here. I think what I understand the witness to be telling me is that she had 11 people,
Yes.
which included enough people to handle all the incoming calls, even if one of the so-called supervisors had to do the job of a CRO? No.
Which we often do
Right.
with call handling, but what we aim at on a night shift or a day shift is 3 supervisors and 8 CROs. Does that make sense?
Yes. Sorry. I was trying to take it in more in stages, but I think the 11 was enough.
Yes.
What I'm trying to get at here is, I think you accept that just as a matter of maths,
Okay.
you had not 9, which seems to be the minimum, but 8 CROs.
Yes.
So my question is, did the fact that you had 1 supervisor over the minimum, but 1 CRO under the minimum, matter?
No.
Right, and why not?
Because that's the number of staff we have, and to be fair, having an additional supervisor is actually more beneficial.
Right. And is that because one of the supervisors, picking up on the chairman's question, was able to do the CRO's job, or the extra CRO's job, and take up the slack?
Yes, so when we have a high number of calls coming in, a supervisor will take calls, either myself or one of my AOMs, but we always make sure that is a supervisor that is free to deal with things that are going on in the room as well.
Right.
So we kind of sort of say, I'll jump in and take that, so the other person doesn't.
I understand. Is it common that there is that flexibility, so that you may be a CRO short but have an extra supervisor? Is it that flexible as a matter of routine?
If we have an additional supervisor to the 3, that supervisor will sit on the floor and do the role of a CRO.
Now, moving...
Well, I think the question is it usual to have 3 supervisors and 8 CROs?
Yes,
And I think you've told me already it is.
That is, yes, yeah.
Right.
Yes.
And would you ever have a situation where you had 4 supervisors and 7 CROs, for example?
Yes.
Yeah. So what I'm trying to get at is how
see.
flexible these boundaries are.
Yes, they are flexible, yeah.
Now, at the top of page 4 of your witness statement, you say at 00:55 hours on that Wednesday, we received a call from a member of the public telling us about a fire in a flat. What were you doing at that point? Do you remember?
I believe I was actually out of the room making myself a drink
Right.
at that time.
Do you actually have a personal recollection of the call?
No, I don't.
Right, I see. I think it would follow from that you wouldn't have heard the floor or flat number.
I've heard it since, because I've heard the call, but I'm not at the actual time. No, I didn't.
I think as you say, that it was CRO Pamela Jones who answered the call, took the information and mobilised the appliances. Did she communicate the details of the call she'd taken to you when you came back into the room?
No, she did not.
Now, you go on to describe how the vision system got confused and treated the premises as a house and not a high-rise because it had a flat number, 16, and therefore got the wrong PDA, which was then corrected. My question is, does the vision system often get confused in the way in which you've described it there?
When we first went live with the system, we had a few issues with some address records, yes, for quite a long time, but that has improved greatly since. So it did sometimes happen with high-rise buildings, that if you put just the building name in, it would recognise that it was a high-rise building. But if you put a flat number in, it wouldn't always recognise it.
Right. Do you know what alerted Peter May to this issue so that he would then, as he did, amend the PDA?
Yeah, so when I came back in the room when this was actually going on, we were discussing it, and I think he had an awareness of Grenfell Tower. I think he'd probably dealt with an incident there previously. I think also the fact that it was a tower made him sort of obviously think about what it was, so he looked it up to confirm. I think he looked it on Google Maps, I think, if I recall right, and saw how tall it was.
Could I ask you then to look at the short incident log, which is at tab 23 of our documents bundle, and turn please to page 16. I'm so sorry, 17. Page 17. And look at the time mark of 01:16:02, where you'll see an informative message with the operator indicated there as SAD, that's Sharon Darby. And here is an informative message, SUP from G272 residential block of flats, 20 floors, 25 by 25 metres, 5-room flat on 4th floor, 75% alight, high-rise procedure implemented, MDT in use, tactical mode Oscar. My question is, did you see that informative message when it came up on the system?
Yes, I did.
You did. What was your impression of the incident at that time? Do you remember? What do you think was happening?
I wasn't overly concerned about the incident at that time. We have quite a few flat fires in high-rise buildings,
Right.
and quite similar to messages like that. So the fact they'd made it a 6-pump fire is quite standard for a high-rise fire.
Okay, so at that
just
stage,
one flat. Yeah.
you'd seen there was a make-up to 6 at 1:13:39, and you'd seen the informative from the fire ground. You weren't overly concerned at this point?
Not at all, no.
Right. Were you then see on the vision, well, the short incident log, that the make-ups increase. And just looking down, aerial ladder is requested at 1:18, and then at 1:19:35 there's a make-up to pumps 8, and then at 24 make-up pumps 10, and it goes on down.
Mm-hmm.
At make-up pumps 10, what thoughts did you have about the way this was beginning to develop, this incident?
I was thinking that maybe it was obviously spreading and they hadn't got it under control.
Right. At pumps 10, you say they hadn't got it under control. Did you have any thoughts about, at that stage, whether the standing stay put policy that you say you would have assumed was in place at Grenfell should be changed?
No, I hadn't. And I don't know if we'd actually received any calls up until then, had we? Inside, I think maybe one or two, but it was around that time that the calls from the people inside actually started coming in.
Yes, they did. Now, moving forward then, just going down the SIL to 129.53, which is well, sorry, 128.09 actually is 15. I've jumped ahead a little bit just because I think we can, but we get at 129.53 at the top of the next page. We could see make pumps 20.
Yeah.
At that point, or at pumps 20, did you have any new thoughts or fresh thoughts? Or how were your thoughts developing about the incident as we see these pumps in?
I knew something had gone badly wrong.
Right.
It was also the speed of it. I've never known a make-up to be that quick.
At what point, in terms of pump acceleration, even at that point, where we haven't yet got to 25, but at 20, at what point in that rate of make-up did you realise this incident was outside your experience?
I don't think at the point of 20 or 25 it was outside my experience, right, to be honest. I've dealt with 20, 25 pump fires before, so...
But the rate of...
do you mean the time of it going up? Oh,
yes.
That's the first time I've known anything to happen that quickly.
Yeah, but at what point in the escalation, so you go 8, 10...
Right,
15,
I would say probably the 15, 20, 25,
right,
because that was extremely quick.
Now, at 128.47, as we can see at the top of page 18 of the short incident log, 128.47, you can see persons reported.
Yeah.
Did that prompt any thoughts in your mind about what was happening with this fire?
I was thinking that there was going to be a lot of smoke affecting the floors, because smoke will travel. I was thinking it's probably travelling up. My thoughts, it was travelling up the stairs,
right,
and affecting people's properties going further up, and people believed they wouldn't be able to leave.
Did you think that the fire was still on the 4th floor?
Yes.
You did?
Yes.
And what about by the time it got to pumps 25 at 01:31, as we can see, just a bit lower down, at 01:38, 1:48? Did you still have the same thoughts that the fire was still contained in the original compartment?
I don't really know what I was thinking at that point, to be completely honest, because there was so much going on then with processing the make-ups. I was shocked that he went to 25 pumps, and I was thinking, what is going on? We had no idea. We had no other message or anything, so I had no idea. I was wondering if it was spreading to other flats on that floor.
Right. Now, in general terms, we know that there are FSG calls beginning to come in at
Yes.
that stage. Did you have any thoughts as as ops manager in the room at the time about whether stay put was the right advice to give?
No, I did not, no.
Okay. Did the fact that these make-ups were accelerating at this pace alert you to needing to look at the stay put policy and actually ask yourself whether it should?
No, it didn't.
Okay.
No.
At that stage, we're now at 25 pumps, 131.48. Did you expect to receive more information from the incident ground than just the one informative message that we saw at about 1:16?
I was expecting something, yes.
Did you seek to contact the incident ground for more information about what was going on?
No, I didn't. We were extremely busy in the control room and just didn't have an opportunity to be honest.
Right. Now, you say in your...
Sorry.
I'm
Sorry.
so sorry.
I was just saying I was expecting something at any point, so and we would normally chase them after about half an hour to an hour, not after sort of 15, 20 minutes for a message.
Now, in the control report, if we can just go back to that, can I ask you to look at page 32? We talked a moment ago about calls starting to come in. Here is a table of the calls beginning to come in from Grenfell, and we can see that the first one is timed at 01:21:24 from flat 195 on the 22nd floor. And the remarks are the smell of smoke. And that is just after pumps were made 8. And from that time, we can see that the number of 999 calls starts to increase. Were you aware of the growth of volume of incoming calls from about that time yourself?
Yes, I was.
And when that started happening, in general terms, what did you do?
We were still processing the make-ups, and as the calls were coming in very rapidly, because we had a lot of calls from people outside as well at this point, I did take a few calls myself.
Yes.
Because Debbie and Pete were taken up doing mobilising resources to the incident. So I just wanted to answer the calls because obviously people needing help, it's what we do. So I took a couple of calls myself because I was concerned about people being trapped in their premises.
Well, we're going to look at one or two of those in a moment. Before I ask you about those in general terms, did you brief your CRO team about what was developing? No,
I didn't know what was developing.
Right. Did there come a point at around 25 pumps when you thought to yourself, gosh, something strange is happening, I need to make sure I briefed my CRO team?
No, that's not something we would normally do. We would deal with what we give them as it goes. We wouldn't normally brief them about that.
Now, we've got some examples, and we'll look at of you taking calls yourself. We'll look at the details of that later, but why did you decide yourself to take 999 calls?
As I say, Debbie and Pete were mobilising. I think they were both on the phone, possibly to officers. I can't recall exactly. Everybody was busy and there were a number of calls waiting to be answered. And as a control officer, answering a 999 call is what we do.
That's what you do?
Yeah.
And did at that stage, and I say at that stage, 121 to 131, say the first 10 minutes, did you supervise or listen to any 999 calls taken by other CROs?
No, I didn't actually do that on the whole night at all. Right.
Now, can I ask you to move forward in the control report to page 31? Sorry, back to page 31. Back to page 31. And we can see that at the timestamp of 1:35:24 at the top of the page, you ring the team leader on Command Unit 8, and you say you need crews to go and check some flats. And we can see the detail set out there. For the record, the transcript reference is INQ 194, but I don't need to go to that. We can just look at the summary for the moment. Command Unit Operator Watch Manager Daniel Merrick explains he has heard control trying to reach G271, but they are in the process of taking over. OM Norman asks him again to get crews to go to check some flats, and he asks if the information has already been sent by radio. Norman replies saying she doesn't know, and then confirms that the radio message is about a caller on the 18th floor. She then makes a reference to the large volume of calls being received. The information subsequently passed is summarised below, and then we can see information about 4 floors with only 2 flat numbers given and numbers of people in 3 cases, and same with remarks. Now, having shown you that, my question is, why did you call CU8 directly on the admin line rather than using the radio message system?
I knew that CU8 were there. I think Sharon was trying to call up Golf 271 and she wasn't with the priority, and I don't think she was getting any response. I vaguely remember that. There was an awful lot going on, so I think I'm going to ring the command unit and get this information over quickly to them.
Right. Were you aware which the incident command pump was at that stage?
I believe it was Golf 271 at that stage.
And was that the pump handling FSG calls on the incident ground, to your knowledge at the time?
If we had passed any to them earlier, then that would have been yes.
Okay. And do you know why you only gave some floor numbers and not specific flat numbers?
So that's all the information I was given.
Okay. Did you ask the CROs to obtain, or be sure to obtain, more specific information as per the policy about flat numbers and numbers of people inside?
No, I'm sorry, I didn't. I didn't even occur to me at the time, to be honest with you.
Right.
I was so focused on getting information over, and as I say, the control room was, I can't even put into words how busy it was, really.
Right.
It was overwhelmingly busy.
Even at that stage, where you've only got 4 examples, you didn't...
Yeah, but we did have all the calls coming in from outside as well, and other calls, and also the mobilising and everything to do. Yeah. Everybody was fully involved in the tasks that they were doing.
Yes. Given that you were asking CU8 to ask the crews to go and check some flats, what was your impression of the fire by this point, that flats needed to be checked?
I was more... it wasn't so much the fire, it was the smoke. I was thinking that the smoke was affecting all the floors, because those floors are quite, you've got 14, 20, 18. It's obviously going up a long way.
At that stage, did you know yourself what information CROs were taking on their calls from callers?
Only from what I could hear, it was people were saying that they were unable to leave due to smoke.
Right.
Affecting their premises, and they were telling them to sort of block the doors, and unfortunately couldn't stay on the line like you normally would because we were so many other calls coming in, and to call us back if their conditions worsened.
You could obviously only hear one side of the conversation.
Yes, I couldn't hear the caller's side of the conversation at all. And
presumably there were multiple one-sided conversations that you
I could really only hear the ones that were near where I was at that point.
And whose were those?
So I could sort of hear Pam and Yvonne Adams, Pam Jones and Yvonne Adams.
Pam and Yvonne.
And Pete Duddy, even though he was kind of further away, he's got quite a loud voice, so I could kind of hear him as well.
He has. And it's quite a clear voice too, I think.
Oh, yes, he has, yes.
We'll find that out later, I think.
You will.
Now, I think you've answered this before, but I'll just ask it again. Was there a system at any stage, but particularly at that early stage, for collating, developing information so that each CRO would be able to get a better picture of the smoke spread or the fire spread?
No.
And did it occur to you at that stage to, because of the volume of calls and perhaps the fact that you weren't getting information about numbers of persons in the flats or the precise flat numbers, that there was a need to make sure all CROs did obtain that information and collate it?
No, I mean, I wasn't aware completely, and I know I've passed that over, but I would be expecting that if they were able to. I mean, sometimes the caller would just shout something and clear the line. Sometimes they're just not able to get that information. But I would have expected it to have been asked, if possible.
Right. Now, just looking back at pages 18 and 19 of the short incident log, you could start with page 18, at 1:31:38, there is a message. It's a service request created by Pete Duddy. G271, further call to say fire on 20th floor, also people trapped. And then at 132.29, I'll just take 2 or 3 of these. 132.29, persons on the 22nd floor, smoke coming into flat. Did you know at that stage that there were repeated calls about smoke spread that high up in the building?
Only when I was given that information to pass on to the command unit.
Did the intensity of these calls from different parts high up in the building tell you anything about how far the smoke had spread and what the conditions were like?
Well, it told me it spread to the top floor.
Yes.
And there was smoke. I wasn't aware of what the actual smoke conditions themselves were, if it was sort of light smoke or thick smoke. Just
Right.
aware that there was smoke travelling up.
Now, by 1:35, we've had a number of early calls. I'm just going to show you very briefly a number of these in the control report, still on the same theme. If you can turn to page 13. We start with the call at 1:23:50 taken by CRO Adams. Takes a call from a female caller who reports that she's seen a whole tower block on fire whilst driving down the A40. Obviously, that's not an FSG call, but because the person is outside the tower. But the information is the whole tower block is on fire. Did you know that?
No, I did not, no.
And then the next one is 1:24:08, next call, same page. Pete Duddy takes a call from a female caller reporting a fire in Grenfell Tower. The caller reports there's a line of fire going right up the outside of it. Again, were you aware of that?
No, I wasn't aware of those calls.
And at 1:26, I'm just going to do a handful of these. 1:26, moving forward, on page 17 of this report, we can see that at 1:26:54, Pete Duddy takes a call which is transferred from Nottingham. Female caller comes on the line and reports there's a fire in flat 186, Grenfell Tower. She says there's a fire in the whole building, and when CRO Duddy asks if the caller is in the building, she confirms that everyone is out. The caller is advised to stay out, not to go back in, and there are a lot of fire engines already there. Again, 1:26, do you think you were told or found out that the fire was that far up the building? The actual fire was that far up the building, flat 186?
No, I wasn't aware.
And then 1:26:58, which is also the same page as the next one down. CRO Fox takes a call from a female reporting a fire in Grenfell Tower. The caller explains she's on the 12th floor and asks for advice what to do. And it goes on.
We're not always getting the same page that you seem to be.
No, I realise. I apologise. I'm sorry about that. I've jumped
That's right.
ahead.
We got it at
I
one
need to put my
point,
glasses on to see it.
and then we lost it again.
It's my fault.
What time do you want us to look at?
It's 1:26:58.
Right, we're there now.
I'm so sorry, Ms. Norman. Did I showed you 1:26.
It's okay, I couldn't see it because I didn't have my glasses on, so I was just actually listening to what you were saying.
No, it's my fault for galloping ahead, I'm afraid. At 1:26:58, we can see the call taken by Heidi Fox. And the caller explains she's on the 12th floor and asks for some advice on what to do. CRO Fox clarifies the address, and the caller explains she can see the fire through the window and reports that her neighbour says that the fire is in her kitchen already. The caller says the smoke is coming from the main door, and CRO Fox advises her to put wet towels down to stop the smoke. And it continues. CRO Fox states that she will pass on the information to the crews. The question on that is, did you know at that stage that the fire had already reached the 12th floor?
No, I didn't. I was very involved in the mobilising and what was going on in the supervisor's position. I wasn't aware of those calls at all.
And then I'll just one or two more. 1:30, this is page 23. Page 23, at 1:30 exactly, Pete Duddy takes a call from a female caller reporting that there is a fire in Grenfell Tower and that they are stuck on the top floor and that the doors won't open. The caller explains that there is smoke everywhere and the fire is in her house on the 22nd floor. She tells CRO Duddy that everyone is now on the 23rd floor. The caller further explains that the fire has broken into the kitchen of her flat and has run into the neighbour's flat. She has run into the neighbour's flat. FSG is given to explain how to try to prevent smoke from coming in. Were you aware, by or at, or shortly after 1:30, that the fire had reached the 22nd floor? The fire itself had reached the 22nd floor.
I think about 1:30 or just afterwards, I think, is when I started becoming aware of that we were getting calls saying the whole block basically was on fire from top to bottom.
Yeah. Did any of the CROs tell you that not just the smoke but the fire itself had spread up the building as far as the 22nd floor by 1:30?
Not that I can recall, no.
Is that information?
They may well have shouted it out, but there was so much going on, but I don't recall it at all.
Would you, as OM, expect to be given that information by CROs?
Yes. It might have gone to one of the supervisors. They might have spoken to one of them about it, but it wasn't, not to me.
Right. Do you know why that is?
No,
why
I don't.
You weren't given that?
No.
Would it have been possible for any of the CROs, knowing what was happening, to alert the other CROs in the room more formally by a message on the system, the vision system?
I don't think that would have even crossed anyone's minds, to be honest with you. Everyone was so focused on just taking the calls as they were coming in. You know, one call, clearing that one, next one, next one, next one, next one. I think we were getting a picture that it was obviously the situation it was, because I say the room was quite small, so you could hear the noise was becoming very, very loud, very, very loud.
I think you yourself took a call at 1:30:02, still on the same page. It's the next one down. And it says, OM Norman takes a call from a female caller who states that her husband, 3 children, including a baby, are in Grenfell Tower in flat 175 on the 20th floor, and there is a fire in her building. And he goes on, the caller originally states that she is on the 17th floor and then corrects herself. OM Norman explains that the fire is on the 4th floor, and the caller states there's smoke coming into her flat. Is it right then that therefore you knew at that point, or by that point, that smoke had spread, at least smoke had spread?
I knew the smoke had spread, yeah. I wasn't aware that the actual fire itself had.
Right. So does that mean that you didn't hear or know what Pete Duddy had gleaned in the call that he was on?
No, I hadn't.
No. It looks as if, to be fair to you, Pete Duddy's call lasted 2 minutes and 37 seconds, and that therefore you were both on the phone at the same time.
Oh, okay.
But you don't recall him getting off the phone and saying, it's gone to the top, or words to that effect?
No, I don't know.
Did you know, even though Pete Duddy had learnt that the fire had gone to the top, very high in the building, 22nd floor at least, that CROs were continuing to reassure callers that the fire was only on the 4th floor?
I don't recall if I know that at the time. I believe that's the case because I was saying the same thing myself, so that wouldn't have surprised me.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you that as the next question. Did you, at that stage, consider telling CROs to change the reassurance advice that they were giving to callers, such as, don't worry, the fire's a long way away from you, or it's only on the 4th floor, or things like that?
No, I didn't at that time, no.
Is there a reason why that is so?
I can't recall, sorry.
At that point, we're around the 1:30 mark. We can go forward in time as well, but at that stage, did you have any thoughts about the wisdom of continuing to give stay put advice?
No. I still felt that it was the correct advice to give.
Okay. At that stage, given what you could see about the volume of calls coming in, did you think about speaking to a senior officer, obviously not in the control room but remotely, and asking him or her what to do?
No, not at that point. I didn't. I was just focused on dealing with what we were dealing with in the control room at the time.
can I ask you to look at a document which is called the LFB Control Debrief Notes. Now, this is the first time I think you'll have been shown this document. It's LFB *03113. And it's dated the 24th of July 2017. Yes, and we're on the manuscript version, which I prefer. This was just to tell you what this is a manuscript note of a meeting. I think you described these in your evidence earlier, but this is the actual one dealing with the control room, chaired by Andy Hearn. And the attendees enroll at debrief. We can see the attendees. And you are listed one from last, just before Adrian. Alex Norman, Operation Manager, OIC Control Room. Do you see that?
Yes.
Do you remember this meeting?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Now, if we look on in the meeting notes, and I can pick it up at page 3, it says, just below halfway down, A. Norman, advising CROs on advice. Now, the time mark for that, just looking a little bit up the page, is 0131 MP25. And I'll read the rest of it just down to where I've shown you. Speed of makeup unusual, not dealt with like this before. Every control officer engaged in multiple activity, incoming calls escalating. Thankful that control room staff are experienced. P. May, Debbie R. mobilizing. A. Norman advising CROs on advice. Do you remember whether that was something you told the meeting, that you were advising CROs on the advice to give?
No, I don't recall that at all.
Is it correct?
I wasn't advising CROs. I was trying to get information from them because they were giving their advice. The state, block the doors, the smoke, etc. I don't recall that at all.
So you say you were not advising, but you were actually getting information from them. How are you going about that?
Going up and speaking to them.
Right.
Going up to them and trying to get the flat numbers and the premises where people were.
So you did do that?
I was getting the information, but I wasn't advising them on anything to do with the advice itself, if that's how that reads.
Okay. Is this the first time you've seen this document?
Yes, it is, yeah.
I see. So you were never asked to approve the notes of the meeting?
No, not at all.
Right.
I don't remember advising them at that point at all.
There's a typed version. I say version, it's slightly different. Also LFB 3119 0001, which is a slightly different document. I don't know whether that's going to be, we're going to be able to share that to you, but I just want to see if we can. We can. And if you look at that document, it's a type, as I say, version of the debrief meeting on the 24th of July. And two-thirds of the way down the page, it says fire survival guidance, FSG calls increasing, etc. And then it says just above that, because it's the easiest way is to find it that way, it says AN advises and supports control room operators, CRO, dealing with escalating incoming calls. First of all, is this a document you've ever seen?
No.
Before? Okay. Where it says advises and supports control room operators, CRO, dealing with escalating incoming calls, is that correct?
The advice bit, again, I don't recall. Supporting, yes, I was making sure that they were okay.
Right, okay. I see. So
obviously it's very distressing calls that were coming in, so...
So I think from both of those documents, now you've seen them, would I be right in summarising your evidence that you were supporting and getting information from the CROs and advising them, but not advising them on what advice to give? If I can
I was later on, but not earlier, not at 1:30.
No, and we'll come to later on.
Okay.
In due course. Can I now turn then to a different topic? which is information from the incident ground. Before I do, this may be an appropriate moment to ask you, Chairman, indeed, whether we would like a break.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yes, I think
Yes.
that would be a good idea.
Yeah.
All right, we'll have that short break now.
Okay.
We'll come back at 10 to 12.
Okay, lovely.
And please don't talk to anyone about your evidence or anything relating to it when you're
Yeah.
out of the room.
Okay,
All right?
thanks.
Thank you very much. Let's go to the usher. Just a minute before I rise, how are we getting on?
We're getting on fine.
Good?
I'm not sure I can be more particular than that.
No, I just
We're getting on fine.
thought I should ask. Right, thank you. 10 to 12, please. Yes, would you like to ask Ms. Norman to come in, please? All right, do you have your go on, Ms. Norman?
Yes, of course.
Ms. Norman,
Yes.
thank you for coming back to us. In your evidence just before we broke, I think you told us that you went round asking CROs for particular flat numbers. Is that right?
Not particular flat numbers, any flat numbers they may have.
Flat numbers they may have.
Yes, so anything that they had written down or information about calls that they were taking.
Right. Just pausing there. Were they writing down information on paper?
Yeah, are we talking about earlier or later though?
No,
Because
at
this
this
was a bit
point.
later.
At
I
this-
don't know, what point are we at?
What, about 1:30?
Oh, no, not at that point, no, sorry.
Okay, right. So when you say you were going around getting flats, numbers that they had, was that's a reference to later in the incident?
That is later in the incident,
I
yes.
see. Can I ask you then to go to page 5 of your witness statement and look at paragraph 2? And you say in the middle of that paragraph and at the end of the third paragraph, we had in the second paragraph you say we have little communications as to what was happening at the scene. And at the end of the third paragraph, you say there was no information from the crews on the ground. And that paragraph starts with at 0140, so that might give you a time frame. Having shown you that, what information did you expect to be sent from the crews on the ground during this time frame? So between 1:30 or 1:24 and 1:40.
I would have expected with that amount of make-ups that we would have an informative message of the progress or what the actual incident was that was ongoing now.
Could you have contacted CU8 and asked for that information, given that you were already in contact with them?
To be quite honest with you, I didn't actually think about it at the time. I was more concerned with getting the information about the flats and the people involved over to them,
Yes.
amongst doing other things. I mean, it was literally sit down, pass this information, go off and do something else. It was non-stop.
If you go to your second statement that we looked at the very start of this morning, I'd like to show you page 2 of that. This is the statement MET quadruple 05199. On page 4 of that, and it goes, not the right one.
I wonder whether you've got the right reference.
Well, it's strange because
Try one.
yes, I have. You see that? Yes, I have. It's 3 entries up from the bottom. You see heli-telly. We did not have access to pictures from the downlink of the heli-telly, meaning we had no images of how the fire was escalating, and a lot of time was spent on the radio to MPS, who were providing updates of the fire, persons involved, etc., during the early hours of the incident. My question is, how do you think seeing images would have helped you and your CROs during that period?
If we'd seen the helicopter images early on when they started radioing through to us, we may have had more. We would have had more of an idea ourselves of what was going on. That the fire actually was not on the 4th floor, and it was the entire block, entire side of the block. We had no visuals, so trying to imagine that we've had a fire on the 4th floor, and within sort of half an hour, it's now the entire building. Is very, very hard to imagine and visualise.
Yes.
It would have saved me spending so much time on the radio as well, because I was on that radio a lot with the police, taking information from them to pass to our crews.
And that took up a lot of time.
Yes, a hell of a lot of time, yeah.
And were those messages passed to the crews also disseminated around the control room, spread around the control room?
The messages I was receiving on the
Yeah.
radio, they weren't disseminated around the control room, no.
Right. Now, can I just ask you to go back to the control debrief notes at LFB *03113? I just want to ask you about something on page 3 of that document. You say, there. And it's in fact page 4. I'm so sorry. You say at the top of the page, no visual representations or representation at this time. And the bottom of page 3, which is where I started it, looks as if it's after 1:31. So, but it's only, at any rate, before 1:45. And then it goes on to say, heli-tele contacts control, giving info via radio on fire spread. So is it right that even at that stage, before 1:45, the control room was getting radio messages from the police helicopter on fire spread?
I don't know the exact time they started coming up on the radio, to be honest with you. I have no time scale for a lot of the things that happened. It was definitely before 2 o'clock.
Yes. Then just below that, it says 1:45, and then below that it says no access to TV link at Stratford. Are you able to help us with that? Was there actually a television link in place at Stratford?
For the heli-tele?
Yeah, no, for the television.
Oh, sorry, I thought that was about the heli-tele. There was a TV in Stratford, yes.
Do you know whether it was actually workable?
I believe it was, yes.
But it wasn't working on the night?
I think it was working, it just wasn't switched on.
That's what I meant.
Oh, OK. No, it wasn't on.
Now, can I help with that? You say it wasn't switched on. Was that as a result of a decision by anybody?
It was later on. It was discussed with myself and Joanne, I believe Scott Hayward as well, about whether it would be beneficial or not to have the news on. I can't remember the time of that, though. It was a bit later on.
OK. Is the television normally on, or is the television normally off so that if you wanted it on, you'd have to switch it on?
At Stratford?
Yes.
Very rarely work at Stratford, and I don't recall using it when I have been there.
OK. Is there a television at Merton?
There are 2 at Merton.
There are 2. And are they normally switched on, or would they normally be off, but you'd have to switch them on?
They are switched on, yes, they are.
So when this shift started and the television was off, did you try to turn it on, or
No.
is there a reason for that?
Yes. So there were 2 TVs in the control room. There was a large one, 45-inch possibly, which has always been there, which I am aware was not working.
This is in
A plasma
Stratford.
screen, yeah. And there was a small one, probably slightly bigger than this. And it was behind the supervisor's desk. So we wouldn't have been able to view it because it was behind us. It's like a portable size you'd have in your bedroom, maybe. And where I was sitting, or myself and Peter, no one else would be able to see it.
Right.
So I felt early on there was no point in putting it on. But
Let's
that's at
try
the start of the duty, not during the night.
Yes, I see. Let's try and put this to rest and see if we can identify where it was. Can I ask to be taken back to page 175 of the control report? That's 4790. There it is.
Yes, so that's the big one isn't working.
The big one is...
The big one doesn't work.
Doesn't work.
So it's the small one.
Which is...
That's it, there.
Just below it there.
Yeah, which nobody could really see. If you're sitting in those positions and people are all sitting facing you, you're blocking the view of everybody, so...
Okay. Would it have helped to have that television on so that you could get more information, even if through the news channels, about what was happening?
I don't think in the early hours it would have even been on, would it, really? I don't know what time the news helicopters got there and started running their reports. So It's a tough one, really. In some ways, yes, but with the distress it would have caused, on top of the distress that people already were in, receiving these calls, we kind of weighed it up and decided it wasn't. We needed people to concentrate on the calls that they were on and focus on them,
Right.
rather than becoming distressed themselves.
I see. Were you party to that decision?
Yes, I was, yeah.
And at what time was that decision made? How far into the incident do you
I
think?
don't recall. It must have been after 2:30, between 2:30 and 3, possibly.
Right,
I
okay.
really don't remember. It must have been a while into it because Joanne was there, so...
Yes. Now, going back to the control debrief document that we looked at before, 3113, can I ask you just to look at that again and go to page 4? Where we looked at this a minute ago. Heli-tele contacts control in giving info via radio on fire spread. I think you told us that you did get radio messages from the police radio.
Yes.
Did that help you in advising callers, that information that you got that through that route?
We didn't use that information to advise callers at that point. I think it would have caused more panic where there was already panic,
Right.
to be honest.
What specific information do you recall receiving through the heli-tele radio updates that assisted you in the advice, and your colleagues in the advice that they could give? Do you remember?
I don't think there was any assistance with the advice that they could actually give. I mean, I can tell you what the helicopter was saying to me, if that would help.
Well, yes. What?
Okay, so they were saying, from what I can recall, I mean, there was quite a lot of radio traffic with them, but they were saying that the fire was spreading from X floor to 8, I can't remember the floors they said, but from floor to the roof. They believed there were people on the roof. I think they said about 8 or 9 people at one point on the roof. They said there were people at windows flashing their mobile phones. People making sheet ladders. I remember a conversation about someone making a sheet ladder to climb out of a window
Yes.
from a relatively high floor.
Yes. We have some details of those, and we may come back to those.
Okay.
But my question really is, did that information actually enable you, or the control room more generally, to get a clearer picture of the development of the fire and smoke?
We were getting an understanding then that there was basically the whole block.
And was everybody in the control room party to that? Could they share in that understanding?
They would be able to hear that. That radio's on a loudspeaker.
It's on a loudspeaker?
Yes, so
Right.
they'd be able to hear it.
Okay, that's helpful. And then on the same page, slightly different topic, but on the same page, just a little bit lower down, stay put advice remains. Block vents move to other people told to get out if they can. As first question, and then this: control knew firefighters were being committed to rescue. Expectation this will happen. Now, we're here taking this as an accurate note of what was said at the meeting, but is it right that the control did know that firefighters were being committed to rescues?
We did not know officially that firefighters were being committed to rescue. We were expecting that this would be happening and that they would be going up to these flats that we'd informed them of.
So when you say you didn't know officially, does that mean
It's what we believed would be happening.
you believed it,
Yes.
but you weren't told it by the incident
No,
ground?
no.
Right. And was the assumption that you were making that crews were responding to the specific information that you were giving them?
Yes, because that is what would normally happen.
Yeah.
And I'd had nothing to inform me that they weren't committing to rescue, so...
Yes. Now, on the foot of page 5 of your witness statement, if you just go back to that, we looked at it a moment ago, but you say there, between 1:20 and 2-ish, all hell broke loose The calls were constant, and even our critical phone was a constant ringing with other services calling us. It basically became a normal telephone by this point. There was no one else to take calls. The CRO were overwhelmed, and I ended giving the BT operators fire survival guidance advice to pass on to callers. Can we just look at the first calls that you yourself took? The first one is, and I think we looked at this a moment ago, at control report page 15 at 1:25:16. We can go back to the control report and look at page 15. We looked at this earlier. That is there a summary of the call. First of all, do you have any particular recollection of this call?
I have listened to it since. I've listened to it since.
You've listened to it?
Yes,
right.
I have.
Now, I'm going to take you to the transcript of this call, but before I do, I just should just give a trigger warning to people in the room that there are no images of fire or anything like that, but it might trigger an unpleasant recollection or reaction in some people. So I'll just give that warning now, and if people want to leave the room or turn their heads and ears away from the live stream, then they should. It's LFB quintuple 0308. And I just...
You're not playing it, are you?
I'm so sorry?
Are you going to play it?
No, I'm not going to play it. I'm just going to show you the transcript. This is just so we're clear, this is a London Fire Brigade transcript.
Okay.
If there's anything on it that you recall which you think is wrong, then obviously please say.
Yeah.
So we start with page 1, and we can see that this is timed at 01:25:16 on the top of the page. It lasts almost 4 minutes, and it's about flat 111. And you're told on page 2, I'm on the 14th floor, it's coming past my window. You can see that. And then you say, right, the fire's actually on the 4th floor. Caller, query, it's on the 14th. Query, no, it's on the 4th. 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, I'm on 14th. I'm on 114. Now, I'm sorry, I've just been alerted to the fact that we're not, I think, on page 2. So just it's the bottom part of that page. You see, I'm on 14. And then you say, right, the fire's actually on the 4th floor. Caller, it's on the 14th. No, it's on the 4th. 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, I'm on 14. And then over the page, you ask, what flat number are you? 114, query. No, I'm 111. I'm on the 14th floor, Grenfell Tower, love. And then there's some discussion about the conditions. And you say at the bottom of page 3, if it's safe for you to leave, then leave. I'm not there, so I can't see the situation. And then and there's some more discussion about that. You ask him, if you go to page 4, there's a discussion between you about whether there's smoke coming in. And he says, a third of the way down, no, there's fire, inaudible, all in my house, all on my side. I'm not burning. And you say, no, okay, so what I'm asking is there any smoke in your flat? Yeah, I can smell it. Just pausing there. Was it clear to you at this stage that the fire wasn't limited to the 4th floor, as we saw you telling him at the beginning of the call on page 2, but actually had spread to the 14th floor, which is where he was calling from? Was that clear to you from what he was telling you?
At the time, I actually thought he meant smoke was outside his window rather than fire.
Right.
It was quite a difficult call. He was obviously very panicky, which I totally understand. Yeah. But I actually believed it was smoke that was outside his window, not fire.
Right. And then you go on at the foot of page 4 to say the safest thing for you to do for now is to stay where you are. I will pass a message to the crews saying that you're in your flat number 111 on the 14th floor. and you make the same. You make the same assurance on page 5. If you just turn to that, just 2/3 of the way down the page, you say, "I'll let the crews know that you're in there." This is 2/3 of the way down page 5, and when they can, they will get up and come and check on you. Okay, all right, all right. I mean, you make the same point a couple more times, 1/4 of the way down page 6, and at the top of page 7, you say, "I'll tell the crews where you are." Did you, do you think, pass the message to the crews about this caller?
Yes.
How would you have done that?
I believe that's one of the calls I passed to CU8.
Right. So you yourself took charge of actually passing that to CU8?
Yes.
And did you learn from this discussion about the location of the fire and how it had spread?
No, because as I say, I still believed it was smoke rather than fire.
Do you remember what details you did pass on to CU8?
Caller on the 14th floor, flat 111, one person. Smoke coming into the flat, I believe.
And if you go back to the transcript, he tells you, it's just page 5, he says at the top, "No, love, I can't even get out, love, on my right." So stay, right, listen, stay where you are. He says, "I can't get out." Right, you need to listen. "Smoke, I can't get out. I'm trying to open the door and there's a lot of smoke, inaudible. I can't get out." Right, so there's no smoke coming in, so you're safe when you're there for now. Did it occur to you at that stage to ask him whether he had any mobility or health issues which might impede his escape?
No, he didn't at all. He told me he couldn't get out because of the smoke.
Right.
That is the point where I would believe that normally somebody did have mobility issues, they would tell you.
Having discovered that from this call that the fire had now spread up to the 14th floor, do you remember whether you told other people in the control room that the fire was no longer limited to the 4th floor where it had originated, but had spread up the building?
I don't remember discussing it. I can't recall.
Now, the next call you take is at 1:30:02, and that's at page 23 of the control report. That relates to flat 175, and we can see that halfway down the page on that page, and there's the summary of it. Just want to take you to the transcript, which is at LFB 314. Pick out one or two things in there. If you can see that it starts at 1:30:02. If we go to page 2, it starts, "Hello, fire brigade. Hi, there's a fire in my block. It's right next door to my building." And you say, are you in Grenfell Tower? Grenfell Tower, 175 Grenfell Tower. And at the foot of the page, it says 17th floor. It's actually the 20th. You're on the 20th floor. The fire is actually, and then you say, on a floor below you. Oh, it's below us. Okay, because smoke's coming into my flat. What do I do? And then you give some advice. At that stage, did you recall the previous call that you'd taken where you'd learnt that the fire was on the 14th floor, had got up that high?
I do recall that call because it wasn't long after, but it was. I still believed it was more smoke than fire at that point.
Is that right? Even though you were told by the previous caller from 111 that the smoke was on that floor, 14th floor?
Yeah, that was my feeling at the time, from what I recall.
Right. It's strictly speaking accurate that the floor was on a floor below. But do you think that, well, was there a risk, do you think, that you were giving him an assurance that the fire was sufficiently far away from him that he shouldn't be concerned?
Yes, with what we know now, yes, of course.
And then you see on page 4, the top of the page, caller 175. You say 175, and you say that's the 17th floor. Yeah. How many, over speaking? No, the 20th floor. I'm sorry, I beg your pardon, the 20th. How many are there in there of you? There's me, my husband, 3 kids, and 1 baby. So there's 5 of you. Yeah, there's 5 of us. And then at the end of the call on page 8, you tell the caller at the top of the page, all right, if it gets worse, give us a call back. Okay, but I'll let the crews know where you are. Did you pass on to CU8 the details, all the details that you'd gleaned from that call, do you think? So 175 on the 20th, where there are 2 adults and 3 children.
I believe I passed that on, saying 5 persons rather than separating it into adults and children.
Right. Is there a reason why you didn't alert CU8 to the fact that they were children?
I was more concerned about the number of people than their ages at that point, to be honest.
Right.
Just the amount of people that were there that they would need to get up to.
Right. Did the fact that they were children not prompt an idea in your mind that they might have been a priority of some kind?
The priority would be, we don't prioritise in that way. The priority is the conditions in the flat and who needs to be got to first. So I thought saying 5 persons was sufficient information at the time. There was so much going on, it's really hard to remember exactly what was going through my mind.
And we can see, in summary form, the information that you then did pass on. If you go to page 31 of the control report, at 1:35:24, we can see you ring the team leader from CU8, and you ask him to check some flats. And then you say, in the summary, the line up from the end, she then makes reference to the large volume of calls being received. The information subsequently passed to summarise below, and then it's summarised in the table there. Flat 111, floor 14, 1 person, got smoke coming into the premises. It looks as if you didn't pass on to the command unit that there was actually fire on the 14th floor.
No, because as I said, I believed it was smoke.
Even though the caller had said to you the fire was...
I may not have heard him. There was an awful lot of noise, so...
Right. And then, as you said just now, you passed on the number of people, but not the children. And again, that you said that's because you didn't see a need to differentiate between them. Was there a reason why you didn't give as much detail as you possibly could to CU8 about the information you were getting from the calls?
I think with the volume of calls that were coming in, it was more important just to get the basic information that we had to them. I think the flat number, the floor number, and the number of persons, and that smoke was starting to enter the premises was sufficient information.
Right. Now, it looks as if before you rang the command unit at 1:35, you took a further call. You can see you took the call about flat 175 on page 23 at 1:30:02. We've looked at that. And if you go on in the control report to page 27, there's a call you take at 1:32:51. Who's a female caller outside Grenfell Tower who's very emotional and panicking. And then you make your call at 1:35:24, which we see on page 31. My question is, why, having told two callers from two different flats that you were going to pass on their details to the command unit, did you then take another call rather than getting onto the command unit straight away?
I can't remember that at all. Sorry.
Okay. Can I ask you about a different topic, a generic topic about callbacks? Joe Smith gave some evidence, and I'm summarising it very, very broadly, that as a matter of policy, the control room doesn't call callers back, and she explained why that was. Just want to pursue that with you a little bit. Can I ask you please to go to page 39 of the control report? And at 1:39:15 on that page, you take a call from this caller, a male in flat 204 on the 23rd floor, who's on his own, and he says that there's a little smoke coming into his flat, and you tell him to go to the room furthest away from the smoke and to call back if it gets worse. I'm summarising the summary. At the end you say, as you see, she advises him to call back if it gets any worse. Now, if you then move on in the control report to page 48, you can see you, at the top of that page at 1:46:02, make an outgoing call to the resident that she speaks to at 1:39. Do you see this? Who reports that he's in flat 204 on the 23rd floor. And O.M. Norman calls to check that he is still safe. And you continue to give advice there. Do you remember that specific callback you made?
I do, and it was actually, I didn't intend to do it. I meant to call so we have a list of numbers that we can read our last numbers called, and there's 4 of them, and I put my finger on what I thought was the command unit number, mobile number, and it actually was this gentleman's mobile number. So when he answered the phone, I realised that I'd recontacted that person. But I wasn't just going to clear the line, so I just spoke to him.
I see. Okay. So was it a one-off?
Yes, I believe so.
In terms of policy on callbacks, let me just ask you 1 or 2 questions. Are there circumstances in which the control room officers would call a caller back?
Abandoned calls from a mobile, we would call them back.
From a mobile?
From a mobile, not from a landline.
Right, I see. Would a change of circumstances, such as, for example, deterioration in conditions or update of information that you're getting from the incident ground, be a justifiable basis to call back?
I can't say no, because it would be a justifiable basis.
Poor question on my part. Let me rephrase it. In your experience, have you ever encountered an occasion when you've actually called callers back because circumstances have changed? Or...
No.
Right.
No.
Was there a policy reason or a practical reason not to call callers back if your information got updated about the conditions in a building?
I actually can't recall a time, apart from that night, when it would have been necessary, to be honest. But it's a historical thing that we didn't call callers back, especially on landlines.
Yeah. So if you... same question, where the stay put advice changes. If, for example, you just told someone to stay put, crews will come to get you, and then you're told, no, stay put's off, everyone's got to get out, is there a reason why you wouldn't call that person back and say, what I've just told you has just been updated, you now need to leave?
Okay, so that's never ever happened before.
No.
I think it would depend on the amount of callers that were needed to call back and the amount of calls that were still coming into the control room, to be honest.
Yes.
If you've got lots and lots and lots of calls waiting to be answered and you've taken hundreds of calls already, it would be impossible to search through those every single call to find the telephone number to recontact them.
Right. But if you happen to know what you'd called, I think you told us that you did have at least a mechanical facility to press the screen and make a call back, as we saw you did at 1:46.
Yeah, that's only about 4 numbers that come up though. It's like the last 4 numbers that are dialed.
I see.
It's not a long list.
Okay, and if you needed to look at the earlier numbers, would you have to scroll up?
You could go into the instant replay section on your screen, on your X screen. There's an instant replay where you can replay your recordings and it gives you telephone numbers that have called into you.
Yeah.
That'd be very time consuming though with that amount of calls.
Right. Are you aware of any other examples other than you, by accident, calling somebody back on the night?
I'm not aware of any, no.
Okay. Was there any discussion in the control room about calling people back at any stage?
No, there wasn't.
There wasn't. Okay. Okay. If the stay put, as we advise, changed, as we know it did, how else would callers who'd previously been called and told to stay put know that that advice had changed unless they'd been called back by the control room?
I know, that is a really hard one, but with the amount of calls we had on that night that was still incoming and the amount of calls that we'd already received and the amount of people that we actually had available in the control room, we wouldn't have been able to continue taking other 999 calls to recontact those callers. The hope would be, this is my personal feeling, that those callers would be calling us back to say their conditions were worsening.
Right.
So we could give them that advice.
I see. So you were relying on them to call back in?
At that point, yes.
Okay. We'll come back to stay put changing in a moment. Can I just ask you 1 or 2 questions about overflow calls? Now, you say in your statement on page 3 that you have a buddy system. And you have it with North West. And West Midlands, you see that there. Did you receive any calls from West Midlands Fire Service on the night?
No, so West Midlands, we receive their calls on the buddy system. North West receive our calls.
When did you first become aware that other services were taking calls for you for this incident?
I can't recall the time, but it was the same time as I was talking to the police helicopter, because I was between the police helicopter on the radio and so we've got a critical phone in the control room, and they were coming up on that, which was actually quite unusual, but they obviously couldn't get through on the through the 999 call system.
Right.
So they were calling up and they're passing information.
And what did you tell them?
I told them that what the incident was and the calls that we were getting, not not individual, but the range of calls that what people were saying to us, and they were passing information back to us. But we told them the incident that we were dealing with. We were dealing with a 25 pump fire, or 40 once it was 40 pump fire.
Yeah. Now, we can see, if you go back to the control report at page 50, that at 1:47:13, 1:47:13, at the top of the page, Christine Howson takes a call from Kent FRS Control. And the Kent CRA explains that BT have contacted them, saying the brigade are very busy and that BT may want to pass on overflow calls to them. Did you know that at that time?
Not at that precise time, no, I didn't.
Did Christine Howson tell you about that call afterwards?
She may well have done, I just don't recall that.
Right. What is, in very brief terms, what is the system, can you describe it for us, by which BT tip calls over to other buddy services? So
BT will obviously realise that there is a lot of calls waiting to be answered. They will have probably listened to some of the calls and understood what is happening, knowing that we can't cope with the demand in our control room. So they will contact surrounding brigades and explain the situation to them. London have got this large fire, can we pass calls on to you?
Right.
Can you take some of the overflow calls?
I see. Is there a formal agreement in place for that, to that effect between BT and the London Fire Brigade?
I believe there is a formal agreement in place, but I couldn't tell you any more about that.
Can I ask you to be shown page 42, please, of the same report? At 143, at the bottom of the page, you take a call from the NWFC Northwest, and summarising it there, you come to an agreement, and you see this at the bottom of the page. The two operators agree that NWFC will only contact London if they have people trapped. And they then go on to say they have another call. Just going over the page. With 5 people in flat 175 on the 20th floor. That's one of those we saw you'd already passed on to CU8. So this is another call. I want to ask you just about the agreement you reached. Did you make any agreement of that kind with any other FRS other than Northwest?
Not that I recall myself, no.
How did you implement the passing of information from other fire and rescue services to the control room? How was that implemented?
How do you mean, sorry?
Well, did those control rooms then call specific lines in the control room, or did they just call in on the normal line?
No, so they all have allocated lines which
Right.
come up on the X, but the calls that I remember taking, most of them were actually on the critical line phone.
I see.
I think it's because they would be held in a queue behind all the other 999 calls on the X.
And when the stay put device was changed, a subject we're going to come to very shortly, when it was changed, did you do anything to ensure that the other control rooms, such as Northwest, were contacted and told about the change?
No, I believe that Joanne Smith did that.
Right. Do you know whether every control room was contacted?
I think that one of the control rooms, possibly Surrey or Kent, I don't recall exactly, said that they would pass the information around to the other control rooms.
Yes. Okay. Did you know on the night of the fire itself that the police and the London Ambulance Services were also taking 999 calls from people in the building?
Yes.
You did? How did you know that at that time?
I can't remember if I spoke to the police myself or someone told me that, but I was aware of that, yes.
You were. And how would the, start with the LAS, how do the LAS start, how do they contact you?
They have a line straight through to us.
They
We
have a
call it
line
a
straight
hotkey. It's just
Okay.
one button you press and it just comes straight through.
Right. Now, if you go back to the control debrief notes, LFB quadruple 03113, and turn to page 4. And again, it's the manuscript version of that. Just about 4/5 of the way down the page, it says critical line. Police and BT taking FSG did not know guidance. Other FRS did know FSG guidance. Now, there's no reference to ambulance there, LAS, but looking at police. Is that correct that the police didn't and BT didn't know the guidance?
No, they wouldn't. Well, yes, I believe it is correct. They don't deal with fire survival guidance. BT just pass the calls on as a matter of course, and the police obviously do what the police do, but they don't deal with fire survival guidance.
No. Did you know at the time that the police and BT were ignorant of the guidance and were asking for what? Well, we're ignorant of the guidance. Did you know that?
It's not something I'd actually really considered until that night.
Okay. Were you asked for any advice as to what to tell the police or BT by way of survival guidance?
I remember
at this
speaking
incident?
to BT because they had an operator who was on the phone with somebody, and I gave them some advice to pass on to the person.
Right. What about the police?
I don't recall speaking to the police. I may well have done, but it would have been the same. I remember there was a conference call set up with the police, with one of the operators, with one of the CROs.
Right.
The police had a caller on the line,
Right. Yep.
and they asked if they could transfer it, and I think it was a conference call with, I think it was Yvonne Adams, I believe.
Yes. Yes. Yes, we have that, I think, at 1:46:18,
Okay.
so it's still at that stage.
Yeah.
We also have a call at 2:21 when the LAS call LFB and they get Yvonne Adams. My question is, did you then stay in contact with the police, BT or LAS, so that you could communicate updates to them?
No.
Is there a reason why not?
We couldn't. We didn't have the staff or the resources to do that. We were far too busy.
Yeah. Now, you say in your statement, as you've just told us, it's bottom of page 5, that you did end up giving BT operators FSG advice to pass on to the callers. If you just go to page 5, look at the very bottom of that page, that's what you say. Do you remember even roughly what time that was?
No.
No. Was it after the stay put advice had been changed or before? Do you remember?
I think it was before.
I think it was before. Did you tell BT what to say?
I would have given the advice about how to protect the callers, to protect themselves.
Right. Did you ever get any information back or feedback back from BT about calls they had taken?
Not myself personally.
Did anybody in the control room?
I don't know.
Right.
I honestly don't know the answer to that.
Did you follow up with BT to find out whether they'd taken any calls?
No.
Okay. Now, Jo Smith says that she did speak to BT to tell them about the change in the stay put advice. Does that accord with your recollection?
Yes.
It does. Did you hear her do that?
I don't think I actually heard the conversation, but I saw her going over to that telephone, yes.
Right, okay. And roughly, do you remember what time that would have been?
Probably about 2:45 maybe.
Okay. Now, do you know whether, finally on this, whether BT ever made any callbacks themselves?
No, I don't know.
You don't know. Now, on pages 5 and 6 of your witness statement, we could pick it up right at the foot of page 5 where we've just been and go over to page 6. You say, control room officers normally stay on the phone for FSG calls, but my staff just couldn't stay on the phone for that long, so we had to be efficient in giving advice, then moving on to the next call as we had people waiting. We couldn't follow the policy in these circumstances, and there is no amount of training that would have prepared anybody for that. Was an operational decision made, generally, not to stay on FSG calls?
It was advised that to sort of try and get all the information you can, give the caller advice to protect themselves and to call back and then not stay on the phone and try and move on if possible, because of the sheer volume of calls that were coming in. I know there were a few calls that did last a long time, but the majority of calls we were just getting the critical information that we could off them, and then.
Yeah. But when I say it was an operation, when I ask you whether an operational decision was made.
Do you mean from the fireground?
I mean, no. Sorry, it was my fault. I may have confused you.
Okay.
Was a general command decision within the control room made that CROs would not stay on, or was it left to individual CROs to decide for themselves to terminate calls?
Oh, I don't really recall, to be honest with you. I think I may have said, I can't remember, it's a bit of a blur, but I think I may have said to some people to do what you can, get all the information you can that's critical, give the caller advice and to call us back if the situation worsened.
Now, we've got examples of long calls. You've just referred to some long calls. I'll just give you 3. We've got Pete Duddy's at 1:54:14. He was on a call for 40 minutes. Sarah Russell's call with Jessica at 1:30:08, 55 minutes. And we've got Pam Jones's at 1:38:38, which lasted for 59 minutes and 40 seconds. Did you listen to any of those calls yourself?
On the night?
Yes.
No.
You didn't. Do you know why those CROs did stay on the line and not others?
I believe they felt that they, I know specifically with Sarah and the call with Jessica, that because she was a child, that she just felt that she couldn't leave her. She felt that she had to stay with her.
And what about the others? Pete Duddy's and Pam Jones's long calls?
I think they just felt that they couldn't leave them.
Right.
I think the callers weren't prepared. I think they were just begging them to stay on the phone, really, just wanted to stay with somebody and have someone to talk to help them. So most of the callers, when you did finish it, just give them the basic advice to protect themselves, were okay with you calling them back, them calling us back, but some weren't. Some were very reluctant to let you go. Understandably so.
Turning to the next topic, which is passing information to the incident ground and the question of prioritisation of FSG calls. We know that Sharon Darby, as she told us, was passing information by radio message, RT4, and we know later that Jason Olive, once he got his whiteboard system working, was on his own mobile to Dan Merrick and CU8. You say on page 6 of your statement that you asked Peter May and Debbie Reel not to answer calls, but concentrate on mobilising all resources and help you with management. That's the second paragraph. I'm summarising it. While I was passing information to the CU via telephone. That's what you say there at the end of that paragraph. How were you passing the information to the CU? By what method? By telephone.
The information I had, I was passing direct to them by telephone.
Was that the admin line calls?
Yeah.
Was there any other means by which you passed information to CU8, or was it just the admin line?
Not myself, no, I just used the telephone.
Did you stop sending information to the command unit at any stage?
Only when Jason started speaking to them, then it was going to him.
Right. Do you know whether, or did you see, from what you could observe, whether information was being passed both by Jason Olive or you, and by Sharon Darby by radio at the same time?
I don't believe it would have been the three of us at the same time, because I gave Jason that role. But I have heard that, yes, it was going by the radio as well as either the CU and myself, or Jason and the radio. So
at some point there was an overlap of information lines?
Yes.
I see. Radio and Olive, mobile?
Yeah.
You saw that for yourself, did you?
No, I've just known that subsequently.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Can I ask you to look at page 52, please, of the control report? We can see there, on page 52, that there is a time mark of 1:50:49, where you see that Yvonne Adams makes a call on a landline to the mobile phone allocated to Command Unit 8 in order to pass on FSG calls. And you can see what's passed on, 2 flats, 133 and 182. Did you ask her to pass those on?
No, I didn't, no.
Why would she have made that call herself then, if you hadn't asked her to?
I don't know. Were they calls that she took herself and passed on?
Well, it says that she made a call on a landline to a mobile phone allocated to Command Unit 8.
No, I'm just wondering if the flats were calls that she had taken and passed on herself.
I don't say good question, but and off the top of my head, I'm afraid I can't answer that.
No, I don't know. I can't answer that. I didn't know.
My question is really this: whether contact with the CU8 was done through you as the OM, or whether individual CROs were also free to contact CU8 if they had information they wanted to pass on.
There's no set rule at that point. I mean, it could have been passed on.
Okay.
It would normally be the supervisors that would speak to the command unit, so by phone.
Okay. Now, I wonder if you can help me clear something up. At page 83 of the same report, we can see that at 2:28:27, Yvonne Adams rings CU8, passes on FSG information about flat 205 on floor 23, 7 adults. Fire is in the living room of their flat. But as the report says, at 2:22:54, so some 5.5 minutes before that, CU7 advises the control room to pass all FSG information to them. CRO Adams is at a call taker's position and dials direct to CU8. Do you know why CRO Adams passed those FSG messages to CU8 and not CU7?
No, I don't. And I'm sure Jason Olive was actually in place by then as well, so no, I don't know the answer to that.
Right. Was the fact that each individual CRO was free to call the incident ground, was that responsible for...
It's not something we would normally do, to be honest.
What the CROs would call the incident ground?
No, they would usually speak to them on the radio. It
Right.
tends to be the supervisors that would speak to the command units.
That was the question. So it's normally the supervisors that speak to the CEUs.
Normally, yeah.
And what follows from that is, were you aware that the fact that CROs were taking it upon themselves, it seems, to contact the incident ground, the cause of confusion or delay or anything like that?
No, I wasn't aware of that.
Okay. Now, still on the subject of communication, if you can go back in the report to time mark of 150:49, which you'll find on page 52, which we've just seen. And I should have asked you this while we were on the page, but it follows, I think. At the foot of the page, the command unit operator asks CRO Adams if there is a priority for calls being passed to them, and asks control to indicate a priority by smoke density. Do you remember whether CRO Adams communicated that request to you?
No, I don't recall that.
Right.
But she may well have passed it to one of the supervisors.
Right. Would you expect her to pass it to you or one
I
of
would
the
expect her to pass it to somebody, yes.
I see. Now, at the top of page 7 of your statement, in the first paragraph, you say that the control room started to use whiteboards to list all of the calls, flats, floors, and numbers of people in current situations. This was all to forward onto the command unit. I didn't photograph the whiteboard to show what we had done, but I know the DAC Adrian Fenton photographed it. Just so we're clear, can I ask you to be shown MET 000017094? And keep scrolling down that so that we get to the photographs. I'm sorry, my fault. Leave those on the screen if you would, Paul. Let me just ask you then generally about the whiteboards. My question is, did you see Jason Olive set the whiteboards up?
I believe that was Adrian Fenton who set them up.
Right.
I can vaguely recall Adrian moving them around anyway.
Yeah. We don't need to do this. Was there any other method of... Well, let's look at them. Can I ask you to be shown at the same time 000016912? And also 16906. That's MET 000016912 and 16906. Now, one of them is upside down. While it's being rotated, I can still ask the question. Are those are the whiteboards you were referring to in your statement?
Yes.
And they were who was mainly responsible for populating them? Do you remember?
I don't recall if Jason was writing on them or not. I know he was passing the calls. He may well have been. There was 2 other operational officers in at that point. Paul McLennican, who's a station manager, and a watch manager, I can't think of his first name, Maloney. I think we're assisting him. They'd come in to be part of the BCC, the Brigade Coordination Centre, but they became involved with this.
Right. And in general terms, once this system started operating with the detail that we can see, in general terms, how was the information going from from CRO to whiteboard? What was the method of communication?
I was either going around and collecting the information from the control officers, or I believe Joanne did when she came in. I think some of them were actually taking it over themselves if they had a spare second.
Right. And that was on pieces of paper, was it?
It was on pieces of paper,
Right.
yeah.
Now, before the whiteboard was set up by DAC Fenton with Jason Oliff, what was the system by which information was collected by CROs in order to be sent to the command unit?
It would be collected when they take all the details, when they take the call anyway, all that information. I believe some were still sending service requests with the information on.
I see.
And some were writing it down but also logging on the system and passing it over.
And once the whiteboard system came into play, did the system change? The system of communication of that information
was
changed?
then going over to Jason, and it was on pieces of paper because he has no access to look at service requests.
Now we can go to the documents I wanted to show you. MET
Okay.
000177094. We can take those whiteboard pictures down and look at this. This is a sheaf of paper, or papers, which were exhibited to DAC Fenton's witness statement, MET 000177094. And I just want to ask Paul to scroll through these page by page as we go, just to see whether the kind of pieces of paper are things you recognise. They were gathered, I should tell you, from the control room on the night, but just slowly going through them, or quickly going through them, you can see there's a piece of paper, flat 152, 18th floor, flat 20 floor, top floor disabled, and then 204, top floor, elderly, can't something, building. And then the next page, you just look at that, some information there about appliances, and then some further FSG information, and then going down to the next page. I'm not going to run through them all. Are these sorts of things familiar to you? What are they,
That
do you
one's
think?
mine.
That one's yours, is it?
Yeah, I recognise my writing.
Which is your writing?
At the top, so I think that's information I was getting from the helicopter, looking at that.
Right, okay. I see.
Northeast, and except sheet ladders, yeah, that was coming from the helicopter.
Right. And what did you do with that information when you got it? You wrote it down on a piece of paper. What did you then do with it?
I believe I passed it to the command unit.
Right.
I can't be 100%. I would have passed it over. So I think that's what I would have done, but I can't remember how.
Let's look at the next page, or two. Here we see a piece of paper with 3 addresses on it, 3 flat numbers. What would that be?
Sorry,
Does that look familiar to you?
the information, not the actual physical information itself, but yes, the notes
Right.
are familiar.
I mean, as a document, what is that?
Well, it's not a document as such, is it? It's a piece of paper with information on it to be passed over to the instant.
Yeah. Okay.
It's not a document.
Is this a kind of example of pieces of paper written on by control room officers and then passed to Jason Oliff at the whiteboard?
Yes.
Right. Can I ask you to look at two specifically? Page 11. This is a document which says, well, first of all, do you know whose handwriting that is?
It's mine.
It's yours. Flat 9, 2 adults, 3 children, smoke coming in, past 150, wheelchair user. And then flat 175, 20th floor, 5 persons inside, past 150. That's you writing that down on a piece of paper. What did you do with that piece of paper? Did you pass it to anybody else, or did you use that for yourself at that stage?
I think at that time I would have passed the information on myself, but I think it was then put into the all the pieces of paper that to keep them together afterwards when Adrian was collecting it and Jason was using it.
Right.
So everything that had been done previously was passed over as well.
And when you say past 150, what is that a reference to?
That probably, I think it's probably related to the time I passed the calls. But I might have scribbled that later. It was just making sure that I knew that I passed them on. I'd sent that information on.
Right. And if you look at page 17 of the same exhibit, I think we're getting familiar with your handwriting now.
It's a bit of a
That's
scribble on there,
helpful.
isn't it?
Yes, they've got number 111, 14th floor, number 175, 20th floor, 5 persons in living room. There's obviously a separate document, but again with information about 175. Does that show that you got updated information about 175?
No, so that was after the original calls, when I wrote them down and passed them on, because they're the 2 calls that I took early on. All those calls are calls that I took, that I wrote down and made sure I passed them on.
Right, and you passed them on how?
To the command unit by phone.
By phone,
Yeah.
right, okay. And do you remember yourself taking calls and passing on the details to the whiteboards at any stage, or had you moved on to different tasks?
No, I didn't
by then?
take any more after that.
You didn't take any more after that?
No.
Okay. When Jason Olive arrived, did you provide him with any sort of handover?
We explained to him what the incident was, that we were now at, and it was still at 25 pumps then, I believe.
Right.
So yeah, we gave him an outline of what was going on, but I think he was aware anyway. I think he's been listening on his radio.
Right. Now, in your statement, you say that Joe Smith arrived at 2:15, and you said that again this morning in your evidence here. How can you be sure of the time?
That is a time that has been told to me.
By whom?
Oh, I don't recall. When I gave my police statement, I did actually say at the beginning of it that the times that I've put in, I have been told since the incident, not actually they're not memory, but there are times I've been informed of.
Right, okay. Let me see if I can just ask 1 or 2 questions. Do you remember hearing that a major incident had been declared?
Yes, I do.
And do you remember whether Joe Smith arrived before or after that time?
It was not long after that time.
Very good. Now, did you provide her with a handover?
Yes, she came straight to the officer of the watch position and explained what the situation was, where we were, the amount of calls that we were receiving. Joanne asked if anyone had been on the phone for a long time, and I believe she spoke to Pete May about that, and he told her about some of the calls that had been ongoing for a long time.
Right. Okay. And what did she do, in general terms, as soon as she took command in the control room? What was her first actions, to your recollection?
She asked if there was anything we needed. Was everybody okay? I think there was a big concern about the welfare of the staff at this point as well. And then the priority was about the calls that have been going on for some time. Some of them have been near enough an hour, and obviously there was great concern about that. That's kind of a cut-off point, an hour really, with us for calls.
And did your role change at all after Joe Smith arrived?
No, it didn't.
Right. Now, Mr. Chairman, I've noted the time.
Yes.
I'm not finished with this witness, but I am really very close to the end. I don't want to make an estimate and be held to it.
Well, it might be more sensible to stop
sensible
now,
to break
because if you tell me it's 10 minutes and it turns into 15 or 20, it won't be
I'm not doing
very
anything like that.
satisfactory.
But it's important that we make sure we've covered every point.
Of course.
So if I'm going to ask us to rise now. Is that convenient to you?
Yeah, that's fine.
Ms. Norman, thank you.
And then
Come back at
we'll come back as usual.
2 o'clock. 2 o'clock, very good, thank you.
Ms. Norman, we'll have a break now so that we can all get some lunch.
Okay.
Please don't talk to anyone about your evidence or anything to do with it while you're out of the room. And we'll resume at 2 o'clock, please.
Okay.
All right? Thank you very much. I'd like to go to the usher.
Yeah.
Thank you. Good. 2 o'clock, then, please.
Doesn't it go to bed?